guys, we are the #1 FAFSA completer in the country, and that is due in a large part to the great work of Woodward Hines in getting this. So this morning, we want to recognize them and thank them so much for all of their hard work and making sure that we are getting those FAFSAs completed. So Kel, take it away for us. Everybody knows Kel. This is the Executive Director of the Community College Board for Mississippi. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to visit with y'all this morning briefly on the current status of the Mississippi Community College system. I'd like to provide a brief update to the state on the day, who we serve, and how we continue to support the state's workforce and educational goals. Before you, you've got a copy of my presentation. This morning, before I get going, I'd like to recognize Dr. Diane Watson, one of our board members from the Brookhaven area, and Dr. Mary Graham, president of Gulf Coast Community College. We have other college personnel in the room as well, but thank you all for making the trip up. This morning, I'll cover 5 main areas: a brief overview of the system and the students we serve, an explanation of the current community college funding formula, a walkthrough of the process for approving new career tech programs, an overview of an economic study of the community college system that InSpark completed back in March, and then finally, our FY27 budget priorities. Before diving into the numbers, I would like to share with you a little bit about our system structure in case you're not aware. So each of our 15 community colleges is locally autonomous, governed by a local board of trustees made up of appointments from local county supervisors and some county superintendents of education. These boards govern the 15 community colleges and are responsible for things such as hiring the president, approving programs, setting tuition rates, and considering policies that govern the day-to-day operation of the colleges. The Mississippi Community College Board is the coordinating entity for the state's 15 colleges. Some of our roles and responsibilities include verifying enrollments each semester and then providing state reimbursements to the colleges for those figures, curriculum development for career tech programs, oversight of the virtual community college, which results in the savings of a significant amount of dollars each year, serving as the state's adult education office, and then what I like to call all other duties as assigned, if you will. Our mission at the agency is to advance the system through coordination, support, leadership, and advocacy. That mission guides everything we do, from overseeing the statewide programs to supporting the colleges and meeting the needs of their communities. I'm proud of the work that our team does on a day in and day out basis to help better the state. So just a community college system overview. When we talk about community colleges, I think it's important to remember who we are serving. The typical community college student in Mississippi may look different from what the stereotype people often imagine. Average age of a Mississippi Community College student is 22 years old, but we do serve a wide range of students, from high school students earning dual credit to adults learning, returning to upskill their training and their educational opportunities. 62% of our students are female. This is important. 95% of our students are Mississippi residents. Our colleges are truly local institutions serving local communities. 62% attend full-time, and that's important because that shows the growing commitment to students in obtaining credentials quickly and efficiently. Just over half of our students, 52%, are enrolled in academic pathways, many of whom will transfer to a university. And our ACT average is a 19, which is consistent with the statewide average. These students are Mississippians who are preparing for jobs, pursuing transfer degrees, or earning skills needed to support our workforce. So this is an overview of system-wide enrollment. This was taken in academic year 2024. System-wide, we served 88,685 students across all programs. That's an increase of 2% compared to 2023. University Parallel, which includes our academic transfer and associate degree nursing students, remains our largest enrollment category. CTE programs, which are so critical to our state right now, they enroll more than 18,000 students, reflecting strong interest and growth in workforce pathways. Dual credit and dual enrollment continues to grow with 21,422 students taking community college courses. Last year, we had about 15,000 graduates who earned 20,075 degrees and certificates, including 8,200 university parallel associate degrees and more than 7,000 technical and career certificates. The awards issued reflects a 6% increase compared to the previous year. And at the bottom, I think it's important to note that our average tuition and required fees for the entire year is $4,068, which is critical for accessibility. So the next 15 slides, of which I will not go over, is a slide by slide by college that shows headcount enrollment, the number of students receiving a degree or certificate, the types of awards issued, and annual tuition and required fees. Like I said to you, I won't read every slide to you. They're available in your packet, but I do want to highlight what they collectively show. Across all 15 colleges, enrollment patterns vary based on local industries, demographics, and dual credit partnerships. Some colleges lean heavily towards academic transfer pathways, while others, especially in regions with strong employer presence, show higher CTE concentrations. Award production reflects those differences, but every college is contributing meaningfully to degree and credential attainment. Tuition and fees remains affordable across the board, ranging from about $3,400 to $4,900 a year. These differences illustrate a core strength of our system. Each college is uniquely positioned to meet the needs of its community while operating with a coordinated statewide framework. So I'll just click on through all of these. Like I said, all this information is included in your packet. If y'all have questions about an individual institution, you can please reach out to me. So I want to talk real quick about our community college funding formula. Community colleges receive state support based primarily on the number of full-time equivalent or FTEs that they generate in a semester. One FTE is calculated by adding all hours taken by students during a semester and dividing by 30. This formula is written directly into our support appropriations bill that y'all approve. Important to note is that the funding formula we use today has been in place since FY 2004. I think the FTE model is a fair one because it provides funding on the number of classes taken, not the number of students enrolled. A model based on headcount could provide the same amount of funding for a student who takes one class versus another student who takes 4 classes during a semester. So the current formula originated from a legislatively mandated study for our agency back in 2002. We contracted with a group, MGT of America, in November of 2002. A group was established that was made up of members of the colleges, our agency, and legislators at the time. They met several times and landed on a recommendation that was eventually adopted by the legislature. So this is how it works. 15% of our appropriations is a base amount. Each college receives the same amount from the base. In 2025, that was about $2.1 million that each college received. The remaining 85% is distributed based on FTE with weights assigned to different types of instruction. Those weights are academic, technical, and career. They get a weight of 1. Associate degree nursing receives an additional 1.19, and then allied health programs receive an additional 1.19. So those 2 categories receive a weight of 2.19 FTEs. There's a total of 18 allied health programs that are on this list. Those are high-cost programs. And the current value, or I'm sorry, in FY25, the value of an FTE was $3,560.96. This weighted approach recognizes that some programs, particularly healthcare, carry much higher delivery costs due to accreditation requirements, equipment, and clinical supervision. But the formulas have remained mostly unchanged for 20 years. We've tweaked it a few times with changes to the virtual community college when it comes to sharing and hosting students. During that time, the cost of delivering instruction, especially in technical and health programs, has increased significantly. Nonetheless, the model provides a clear, predictable way to allocate state support. So now I'll talk about our process for approving career tech programs. So in FY '24, there were 156 different career tech programs at the various campuses. I want to walk through how these are approved in Mississippi. Before a new program can begin, a college must submit to our agency a detailed application that includes a formal letter of request, employment needs data demonstrating labor market demand. This includes both federal and both state and district labor market data for projected employment, wage projections, which is your average annual salary, and 10-year employment outlooks. Student interest data must be included showing significant enrollment potential. An advisory committee recommendation that ensures employer input is provided is submitted as well. If applicable, professional association or accreditation is provided. And then the appropriate curriculum that aligns to the framework. And then finally, evidence of local board approval. Once all components are reviewed and validated, our board considers the request. This process ensures that new programs align with workforce needs, avoid unnecessary duplication, and maintain quality and consistency across the state. The colleges regularly review their programs to ensure that they are needed in the job market and the local economy, and that there is student interest. Based on these reviews, colleges may adjust their offerings as they see fit. The next couple of slides I'd like to share with y'all are pertaining to an economic impact study that we had done at the beginning of the year. It's this blue report in front of you. So NSPARC at Mississippi State, economic impact study for us back in March, and it includes a lot of good information about the overall impact of the state. The findings reinforce what many of y'all already know, and that's community colleges are one of our most valuable assets. Specifically, it shows that our graduates stay in Mississippi. More than 84% of our graduates either work in Mississippi or continue at a Mississippi public university within 1 year. This is one of the highest in-state retention rates of any part of higher education. Secondly, our graduates get jobs. Nearly 75% of non-university bound graduates are employed in Mississippi within a year. They earn strong wages. The average first-year earnings is $35,116. For AAS graduates, which are our career tech graduates, it's $43,452. For certificate holders, $1,000. And for AA graduates, $26,000. 5 years after graduation, AAS students' earnings rise to $51,767, which is above the state average wage. It shows that in 2023, 27,000 Mississippians received non-credit workforce training. 3/4 of those folks were employed after training. Their average wage increased by nearly $6,000. They generated 3,226 additional jobs and $160 million in wages statewide. With Accelerate's vision and work, I feel confident that those outcomes will continue to increase over time. The report shows that community colleges strengthen university completion. In 2023, 4,550 former community college students completed a bachelor's degree at a public university and found in-state employment. Those graduates generated 4,127 additional jobs and $233 million in wages. Our colleges are both the state's workforce engine and the primary source of transfer students for universities. And finally, it shows that our system grows the economy. Community colleges are a major statewide economic driver. $2 billion in wages and salaries generated annually, either directly or indirectly. $243 million in tax revenue. Nearly 40,000 jobs supported statewide when indirect jobs are included. And then for every dollar paid to a community college employee, $3.50 is generated in statewide earnings. The system directly employs 8,100 Mississippians, making our colleges some of the largest employers in their areas. There's a lot of good information in that report on the work being done by the colleges and the impact of our system across the state, and I hope you will have an opportunity to review it. It's something that we're really proud of. So the last slide that I'll mention to y'all are our budget priorities. I want to take an opportunity, since I had a captive audience of legislators, to mention our legislative budget priorities heading into the session. We're asking for salary improvements as our top priority, $28 million, which is a 6% increase for our most important asset, our folks. Basic operation increase of $28.5 million, as y'all are aware. The cost of everything is increasing, utilities, fuel, et cetera. Our Career Tech Advantage program, which the last 4 or 5 years, y'all have provided $10 million dedicated solely for career tech programs, the expansion of existing ones or the creation of new ones. We are very grateful for that pot of money, and we're asking for an additional $5 million for that. We're asking for $150 million for capital improvements, R&R. As y'all know, the cost of maintaining our buildings is increasing. And so we think that's a reasonable request. And then lastly, adult education. The state provides very little funding when it comes to adult educational efforts. And so we're just asking for $2 million for our agency as the state's adult education office to be used for that effort. We have, y'all have probably heard me say before, 300,000 Mississippians without a high school diploma. And those folks are oftentimes just poverty. And so anything that we can do to help better those lives, I think, is a wise investment of state resources. So that's an ask that we have from the agency. So in closing, our colleges deliver tremendous value to Mississippi through student success, workforce alignment, and a multi-billion-dollar economic impact. We remain committed to working with you to strengthen pathways for Mississippians to gain skills, earn credentials, and contribute to our state's economy. Thank you for your time and your partnership, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments this morning. First of all, I would like to say thank you. The legislature is well aware that Mississippi has probably the best community college system in the country. With the 80,000 students that you've got, plus the 80,000 students that included in the IHL, and I know you're comparing apples and oranges and bananas, but with the money that they receive versus the money that you receive, Dr. Alsa Brooks, Dr. Graham do a phenomenal job in maintaining and doing the work that has to be done for the community college system. And first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that they do. Second thing is on your budget priorities. I see you've got the 61 million, but what about R&R? Don't you need to include about 150 million for some R&R up there and let's do some renovation and repair?
That is a fair ask, $150 million for R&R. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Williams.
Okay, now you're stealing my thunder over there. The 150 million ask you got for R&R, is that R&R dollars?
It's R&R and capital, so it'd be
CapEx.
new construction, repair and renovation.
I guess my question, we'd asked this kind of as we went on the public property tour. What of that 150 million is strictly R&R that's state request, and what amount of R&R budget number do you have across all facilities that locally be contributed to the R&R component?
Sure. I've got that information
Okay.
in a report. We've got to break down the 5-year capital plan of R&R capital projects and pre-planning. I can get that to you
Okay, that'd be great. I appreciate it.
by
Thank you.
year. So we've got that.
Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. One of the things that we've heard a lot about is salaries. Is this salary number here going to help you get above the K-12 offerings?
We're hopeful. I have to find the numbers, but we are teetering right there at the K-12 level as far as what our average salaries are. And that's a challenge because we have folks that have taught at community colleges for a while that can go to the school districts and make more money. And so we're hopeful that if any consideration is given for salaries this year, that we will be included so that we can help address that issue. I know a few years ago when a big salary increase was provided to K-12, on average, they went above us by a little bit. And we may have made progress to make up that difference, but you're right. I mean, that's a consideration that we have to deal with, is that K-12 salaries are at times higher than what the community colleges are able to offer.
Well, I want to say that I believe Mississippi's junior college system is our diamond in the rough. That it's there. A lot of people just don't realize it, and it's a fine way. I'm a junior college grad, way back in '74, but we appreciate the work y'all do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is, do you have a plan for the distribution of those R&R funds, and how would they be distributed, and what would that be based on?
So we have a formula for everything. And so for CapEx funds or bonds, if y'all were to do bonds, that formula is half enrollment and half evenly. Our R&R formula is half enrollment and half square footage maintained. So that's a formula that we've had. Both formulas we use, the presidents support it. And we feel like that's the best way for facility dollars to be distributed.
So there would be, it wouldn't be based on a need analysis?
No, all of our needs far exceed any funding that y'all could provide. And so, any dollars provided would go straight to needs that they all have.
On our, public property tours, we, toured most of we've been to all of the 15 community colleges. But we can see in some of those some of those colleges, the need is greater than in other colleges. So, I mean, how do we address that discrepancy?
I think the obvious answer is to provide additional funding. We get funding from various sources for our facilities. We get state dollars. We get local taxes as well. Each county is required to provide local millage to their community colleges for general support and R&R.
But based on the funding that you already have, we could never give you everything you need, but based on the funding that you're requesting and the funding that you receive, how do you address the discrepancy that way?
Well, until we change our formulas, I think that's just the way, I hate to say that's the way it is, but that's what we've agreed upon in the past, and it seems to have worked. I hear what you're saying, though.
Have you ever taken a close look at Copiah Lincoln Community College? That's in the county that I represent. They have a lot of needs there, buildings that's probably older than anybody in this room, and your mom and dad put together. And so they've been seeking funds to try to alleviate some of those conditions. And so, I mean, that's why I wanted to know, how do you distribute the funds to really address those needs in an equitable way?
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point. Co-Lin does have old buildings, but we have the oldest community college system in the nation, which means we have very old facilities. And you're right, Representative Holloway, that Copiah Lincoln does have old buildings, as do all 15. So, but I hear what you're saying.
So would you just, I know you're a very creative-minded person, and so would you take a deep dive and take a look at, how we can deal with some of those issues? Because they don't have a lot of new buildings. They have a lot of old buildings that need renovations.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you for your leadership. Our community college system is second to none.
Thank you.
Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kel, thank you for the presentation. A couple of things that I want to kind of tie together based on some of what we talked about yesterday. Based on your presentation, 95% of your students are Mississippi residents.
Yes, sir.
Do tuition waivers exist at community college for out of state?
We have a provision in state law that allows for local boards to waive out-of-state tuition if a business or industry, an agency, or maybe if a nonprofit comes in and picks up that difference, we're required to charge an out-of-state rate in state law.
All right, I'll ask it again. This feels like a law school class. Does the community college have the ability to waive tuition absent anybody offsetting? But yet you're 95% in state.
Yes.
And it looks like your average cost is $4,068 is what I saw in your report. And you have your average ACT, it's pretty close to open enrollment at the community college system, correct?
It is, yes.
So you get our students that maybe have struggled at K-12. I'm assuming you do a lot of remediation.
We do.
And you had 20 some odd thousand students that are dual credit. Those are K-12 students. They're on the community college campus. They may be getting college credit, but they're technically still a K-12 student.
Correct.
So if your cost is a quarter of an IHL institution and someone's coming to you that is academically challenged, that is receiving remediation, that's a more cost-effective way to get them IHL ready. Is that fair?
It is.
Okay. And I'm aware, and I know at Northeast and potentially at some other schools, y'all have gone a step above of just remediation, that you're actually kind of merging these classes, because I could see it very frustrating, because we all want people to go to college and we want to be successful. But if I spend the first 2 semesters, particularly at a very high rate, and I really don't have any college credit, I'm just ready for college, that's a failure probably at the K-12 level, but we take people as we find them. But do you not have some programs where you're doing remediation as well as class credit so that we're speeding that process up?
We have some co-requisite models in place that brings along those students who may have some academic challenges and provides that remediation to them while still earning college credit. That you're spot on. Those who take remediation potentially extend the time it takes for them to earn an associate's degree, which increases the cost, which is not a good thing.
Because we're not talking about CTE classes here. We're talking about people that we're trying to prepare for our 4-year institutions.
Right.
Now, we talk about an economic development speed to market. To me, speed to being educated is a factor, because every additional year, every additional semester, I'm incurring great costs, not only spending costs, even if it's all scholarshiped.
Yep.
I'm out of the market. I'm not earning during those years. So I appreciate the work you do. As it relates to the ask, 2 questions. One is, and I'm going to ask a foolish question, but I think you'll know the answer. Do the utilities and the brick and mortar cost more or less at Northwest than they do at the University of Mississippi? To operate a building, to run the lights. In other words, you're running a quarter of tuition, but
Yeah.
I assume your costs are the same?
They would be the same, yeah.
Okay. And then when it comes to salaries, and I asked this same question yesterday with IHL, and I would challenge the community colleges, because going back to Representative Holloway's questions, each of our local community colleges make a lot of local decisions about buildings. They're working with their supervisors. They're looking at the age of the buildings, what the future looks like, what programs we're going to implement. But nursing had a plus up, and we understand allied health and things of that nature. Those classes are smaller.
Mhm.
So the cost to operate those classes, the same thing is true in CTE, but it looked like CTE had a 1 weight,
Mhm.
the same as an academic class. It costs more to run a CTE class
It does.
In general?
because- Yeah.
I would like for us to look, and, I've got a lot of community college instructors in my district, being the home, district for both ICC and Northeast. But again, if we're having trouble hiring high wage, high demand courses and their instructors, we've got to focus to make sure we have those instructors, those classes, do we not? If
Yeah.
we're going to meet our mission.
You're exactly right. Yeah,
But now this is just a 6% across the board ask.
it is. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Norwood, last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, do you have anywhere in this presentation the dollar, the investment of the local units of government for the community colleges by county?
So so in FY 2024, I don't have it in my presentation, but in FY 2024, district taxes across the system were $73.5 million, which is about 9.7% of our overall revenue.
And do you have it broken down by, which I would be interested in, by county?
I think we can probably pull that for you.
Right.
I can
Thank
send
you.
it to you.
If we can get that, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That was kind of my question is if maybe when the session starts, if you could provide a glimpse of what the millage, each county's putting in.
Yeah.
It's not standard across the board.
It's not.
There's not
There's
a guaranteed minimum.
There's a guaranteed minimum and a maximum. I can't recall what that is. It's set in statute. And obviously the value of a mill varies across the state, but I can pull that statute and get you what the counties are providing.
The local counties can also participate in capital expenditures on community college campuses.
Yeah.
And is there any limit to that?
I think it's for general improvement. The two categories are general improvement or general purposes and then capital projects. I think that's what it is. It's been a while since I've looked at
Can a
that.
county, if a county wants to help expand the campus that's in their county, can they, not necessarily gift, but can they participate in a capital expense program where funds from the county over and above the millage?
I believe they can because you get a Rankin County,
Yeah.
the Rankin County campus, they're probably going above what the county provides, but I can confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Marks, follow up real quick.
And just in addition to that question, they also, I know in a couple of the districts around home, they do tuition guarantees. So not just the required,
Yeah.
not what they actually do, but then the over and above with tuition guarantee. Would love to have those numbers as well.
Go ahead.
I was just going to speak on the salaries. My wife was actually a counselor at Brandon Middle School, and she actually looked at becoming a counselor at Hines Community College here about, I don't know, a few years back. There's a pretty significant difference in salary, and that was kind of the deciding factor for her to stay where she was. And I do think that I just want to kind of speak to the increase that I do think we are behind in community colleges compared to K through 12th education as far as salaries to the community colleges. So I just want to speak from experience that my wife definitely saw the big difference there in salaries. And I just think that is something we need to try to somehow balance out. So I just want to kind of speak on that. So.
Just quickly, yesterday we asked some questions, and I don't know if you were here or not, Kel, about the length of time that we're anticipating. On the four-year colleges, unfortunately, we're seeing 5, 6, and 8-year windows of graduation. On the junior college level or the community college level, and I'm a graduate of it, and I'm going to be an advocate for it. Are we still planning on a business model that remains 2 years? Because unfortunately, I'm seeing where there are students who are not being encouraged to take their core classes. And then all of a sudden they're in summer school after that, getting core classes that should have been pushed. And I'm seeing more of the, and I'm not going to say junk classes, but the lesser classes that should not be pushed in our first year. And then they're having to suffer at the later part. So I'm asking our business model, are we still focused on 2 years at this point? And how do we be sure that our community colleges are pushing for that 2-year graduation window?
We're trying to get them through as quickly as we can, Senator, because we know, like Senator Sparks was saying, the quicker we get them through the pipeline, the quicker they get to work in the workforce. And that is a priority for us to get them through. One good thing about dual credit is we're seeing a bunch of students come to us that have 12, 15 hours, and that significantly shortens the time to completion, sometimes in a detrimental way, because those are some of our high performing students that unfortunately are only at a community college campus for a year, year and a half. And so from that perspective, dual credit is a good thing because it is significantly decreasing the time to completion for that.
I just want to be sure that we're continuing, as our discussion was yesterday, focus on the kid and not the dollar.
Sure.
And that's my number one goal on this situation.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to do is just commend your presidents and staff for going out and soliciting individuals that have already been successful and they're retiring now and bringing them back on staff to help you do some things. That should cut down on the cost
Sure.
of individuals that you're bringing in to do things they've had more exposure. And from my visiting the various campuses, I've noticed that several presidents have done that.
Sure.
And they're to be commended for that.
And that's a great point to make. Accelerate Mississippi has a program where they're trying to identify these career tech folks who may be retiring in the private sector to come and be a welding instructor at a community college. They may not be ready to just ride off into the sunset, but those career tech instructors, they make a heck of a lot more money in the private practice in the private sector versus teaching it at college. So Accelerate's got a great program to try to help address that issue.
Thank you so much, Kel. And you, with your adult education last slide, you have led us into our next speaker. We're going to be talking a little bit about adult education. So if we can have Jennifer Rogers and Dr. Courtney Holer, if they'll come on up and talk about we had Dr. Gentile here, we had him on line to talk about their kind of yesterday, but they also have a program in Tennessee that we are quite excited about. So if you will talk to us about the adult education.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Yeah. Try that again. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss a strategy that we believe can strengthen Mississippi's workforce and labor participation rate, expand opportunities for adults, and support our progress toward not only meeting the Ascent to 55% attainment goal, but also being intentional about it by meeting the State Workforce Investment Board's goal of 19,000 additional skilled workers. Last session, lawmakers from both chambers in the House and the Senate introduced several proposals aimed at strengthening Mississippi's financial aid system. None of those proposals advanced into law, but those efforts revealed two themes, and that is that Mississippi's current aid offerings do not adequately support adult students in Mississippi. And two, any new program should direct the state's resources to overcoming specific workforce shortages. Today, the typical Mississippi Community College student, as you just saw from Cal, is not a recent high school graduate attending full-time necessarily. Many are 24, older, financially independent, working one or more jobs, raising children, returning to school after years away. Yet these students are ineligible for our current state aid programs. At the same time, Mississippi employers continue to report shortages in healthcare, IT, advanced manufacturing, construction, skilled trades. These are those priority occupations identified by Accelerate. Mississippi needs more adults with meaningful credentials aligned to jobs that pay family-sustaining wages. A Workforce Promise grant program, in other states they may be called Reconnect, is kind of our proposed response to how do we meet this challenge. It complements prior efforts to modernize traditional state aid by addressing this large population that is currently excluded from our aid programs, but it also helps the state fill very specific workforce shortages. So why is this type of program needed in Mississippi? I would argue that this is not a higher education issue or a financial aid issue. This is a workforce development issue. State economic data show that our colleges are one of our most powerful workforce engines that we have. 84% of community college graduates stay in Mississippi, as you just heard. So a Workforce Promise grant that was geared toward priority occupations would simply strengthen that economic engine that we already have. We believe that skill shortages are holding back Mississippi's economic competitiveness. The state's workforce agencies have clearly identified shortages in high-wage, high-demand fields. Mississippi's success depends on producing more nurses and healthcare technicians, welders, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, other construction and advanced manufacturing trades, IT and cybersecurity specialists, commercial drivers, and logistics workers. The state, of course, may also choose to prioritize other certain public sector jobs, such as education, as being critical to Mississippi's success. Other states have shown that one of the fastest ways to expand a skilled workforce is to lower the financial and bureaucratic barriers to training. Tennessee Reconnect increased community college enrollment by 40% for the adult population and raised credential completion of that population by more than 14 percentage points. A program in Michigan, Michigan Reconnect, saw 67,000 applications in just 4 months, more than 19,500 adult enrollments in its first 2 years, and 5,600 credentials produced in the first 2 years. And the Michigan program actually increased credential production in high-demand fields. We know that it's not just about enrollment and credential completion. We need enrollment and credential completion in those areas where we need workers. New Jersey's engagement initiative saw 13,500 adult re-enrollments and generated $128 million in added economic activity from those new graduates alone. So we believe that by creating a similar program in Mississippi, but yet targeting students in those workforce-aligned programs, we can ensure that any additional dollars flow directly to industries with real shortages. Adults are Mississippi's largest untapped talent pool. So we think, why adults? Adults are our largest untapped talent pool. Many of these adults are people who may already be in the labor force, but they may not be. They may just need to be upskilled, but they may not be participating in the labor force at all. These are students who often cannot attend full-time. They cannot rely on parental income or other family financial support. And our national data shows that adult learners are driving much of the growth in credential attainment across the nation. Mississippi has tens of thousands of students, adults with some college but no degree, as well as many who've never enrolled. All of their lives and earnings could be transformed by targeted re-engagement. So you may be questioning why the state might need a program like this when there is federal aid available. First of all, Pell Grants rarely cover the full cost of college, especially for part-time adult learners. And that's because even though Pell can cover tuition and often exceeds tuition, adult learners have other needs outside of just tuition. Uncovered costs are typically the indirect costs like transportation, books, equipment, lost work hours, childcare. Pell also cannot be used for many non-credit workforce programs. There is a new workforce Pell program that we are following very closely. They're actually doing negotiated rulemaking this week in DC. So we're staying on top of that, and that may also, will need to be coordinated with any effort that we put forward. Adult learners are also likely to be financially independent, have dependents, juggle multiple jobs, all factors that are associated with lower completion without targeted aid and advising. Some adults also face a lack of remaining Pell eligibility or trouble meeting satisfactory academic progress rules that allow them to qualify for Pell. And that is often because they did try college as a young adult and were not successful. And now they're coming back. They're ready. They're in a position to be ready to be productive and to improve their education. I would argue that tuition-free access alone is not enough for this population. If we do this, we need to be prepared to provide additional wraparound supports for this population. Adults face very different, much steeper barriers than the traditional 18-year-old college student. Research overwhelmingly shows that adult learners are more likely to persist and complete credentials when wraparound supports accompany tuition assistance. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about career advising that's connected to local employer needs, very specific directed advising, help navigating financial aid, scheduling flexibility, offering courses when these adults can be available to take the courses, transportation and childcare considerations that may be stipends to help with transportation and childcare. And support for returning to academics after years of being away from the classroom. Even a workshop classroom is still a classroom, and students may need to be reacclimated. I would argue that these supports are not extras. They are what actually make the investment work. And I think that such support should be intentionally included in any program that we create. In terms of program design for such a program, a broad, accessible grant program is preferable to a conditional loan or a forgivable loan. The evidence being that simple grant-based programs work best. They should be easy to award, easy to manage, to receive, and broadly accessible. Complexity is the enemy of participation. Tennessee's model, their Tennessee Reconnect is kind of instructive in this. They have a tuition-free grant. There are no repayment requirements, and they generated strong enrollment and completion gains with their program. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, there is a repayment requirement if a student doesn't complete a program. They have seen much lower participation, high administrative burden, and relatively little success compared to the other states that have taken the grant-based approach. Forgivable loans also create risk and confusion. They discourage adults who are debt averse. They penalize adults for life events that interrupt their education. So we believe that a simple design would keep administrative costs low. So what would this look like in Mississippi? An adult workforce promise program in Mississippi should include the following features, we believe. Last dollar payment for tuition and fees, that would be after Pell and gift aid, for full or part-time independent adults. So this is for adult students, full or part-time. Enrolled in any program leading to a priority occupation. So they wouldn't just be able to enroll in any general studies program. They would have to be enrolled in a program that is leading to a priority occupation that is defined by either Accelerate or the state or whomever. The program should also include a structure that allows participants to have access to additional supports, such as required advising, Mississippi Works enrollment, stipends perhaps that can be used for books, childcare, transportation, any other indirect costs that may keep the grant recipient from completing their education or training. Obviously, as a bare minimum, program authorization should require annual reporting for transparency and accountability and should cap any administrative costs to ensure that the money flows directly to the students. We are Ascent to 55% goal. I don't know, I'm sure you've all heard this statistic, but for every 1% increase to Mississippi's attainment rate, there is a $20 million correlation to increased tax revenue, reduced services, reliance on services, et cetera. Today, Mississippi sits well below the national average in the share of adults with post-secondary credentials. So increasing attainment is essential for higher state GDP, higher tax revenue, and lower reliance on benefits. We believe that an adult workforce promise is just one essential tool in meeting all of our goals that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. This is not a panacea that is going to solve all the problems, but it is one strategy that we can use to be very intentional about meeting our workforce goals. And that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
First of all, I want to thank y'all because this has been a team effort of y'all really looking at this. Y'all brought this program to us saying that as y'all have been doing research, this is one of the most effective programs that y'all had seen. And then y'all have been working on this, a group of y'all have for a number of months now. One of the things that I think we'll see in legislation as we're proposing this is we will look at this on a pilot basis, looking at doing several pilots to see how this can implemented in Mississippi most effectively. So, and that way you can target those markets, target the community colleges. And we're really looking at this, the legislation that we're going to propose will be focused really at the community college level for this. So, but for those reasons, who all has worked on this? Y'all have all been working on this, and I really do. Y'all have done this over a number of months now. So
Yeah, several of us at Accelerate, Blaze King and I have worked closely together, and Courtney as well. So,
and really digging into the nuances of the program. So anyway, I'll let y'all ask questions. Senator Harkins.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. What would you envision, like, what does a program like this run in Tennessee and Arkansas? What are the funding would you?
well, obviously, the legislature can appropriate whatever amount of funding they want. In terms of the per student cost, just for the tuition piece alone is going to run around $1,200 because you are going to have some students that are going to qualify for Pell. You're going to have others who will. You are going to have some that are part-time. So you can, at least it's actually been very similar in all the states that have created these programs, Michigan, Tennessee, New Jersey. It's about $1,000 to $1,200 per student cost. Where you get into some additional expense, and this can be handled not just through direct state appropriations, but in using existing funds that are available, is those wraparound supports, providing additional stipends to students who qualify. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be $250 to $500 a student. Not every student is going to take advantage of those additional supports, or at least the stipends. Not every student is going to use as much as the next student, but making those supports available so that, we hear all the time, a lot of adults are just one flat tire away from stopping out. It's not that they don't want to be in class. It's not that they don't want to show up. It's that life happened. And it's trying to help make it possible for students to get over that hump. So $1,500 to $2,000 per student max, depending on what level of supports the state did. And a lot of the advising and other structures are already, the community colleges can speak to that, but they already exist. Do they need to be beefed up? Perhaps. Do there need to be scheduling changes that happen? Perhaps. It would need to be a very coordinated effort between several offices and the community colleges to do that.
So I guess what I'm saying is, what would be the request to fund a program like this? Is it $1 million, $5 million, $50 million?
I think.
What does Tennessee, Arkansas, what are some of the other states? What does that look like?
So in Tennessee's spending about $19 million a year, but they have full rollout in all of their community and technical colleges, and they're serving 20,000+ students a year. So
with pilot too.
yeah. So, I think you could very easily $1 million to start for a pilot program, and then expand that. I think if we were serving, obviously Mississippi is a smaller state than any of those states that are, already doing this, but you could feasibly do full rollout, full scale in the state, $8 or $9 million a year.
Okay. And our goal is to get to 55%. Where are we currently?
50, where are we? Like 48 point.
48.
7.
Okay, and I guess one of the components is you kind of touched on it. My concern is that we do this program and then, do you run the risk of people leaving the state for other employment now that they're trained up? Is there any component, and you said some states don't have any requirements, but if we're going to do a grant program, make it contingent upon them staying in state a certain number of years, like, 2-3 years afterwards, if
But to do that, you have to sign, it becomes a loan and you have to
Yeah.
sign a contract with them. And that is going to be a barrier that adults that you're wanting to come in. I would argue that these are place-bound people. These are people that are, the people we
That's
will
what I
be.
was gonna ask you, how many of these do you, I don't know if y'all have a term that, less likely to relocate or something, or are they more grounded in state and less likely to move? Is there any, way to determine what that percentage of student would be?
I don't have data on that. I can look and see what the other states are seeing that are doing this, but 75% of students stay in the 84% stay in state. This is a similar population to what we've already got in our community colleges. These are adults who are raising families, who are already here, who are probably already working. They have lives established here. These are not your, will we lose a handful of them? Probably.
Okay.
But
Well,
I don't
I
think
just
that
was gonna
that's a,
say, how do you ever get to 55 if most of your people you're getting out of this program are leaving or moving off? And obviously 84% staying in, it helps, but okay, thank you.
Representative Boyd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things I was wondering, do you have any idea how many folks we would generate in Mississippi? How many students? I mean, is there a kind of a?
I knew I was going to get that question. I don't. We are preliminarily looking at the program design and how much it might cost and all of that. We have not put numbers together about, like, obviously the goal would not just to be providing more money to students that we already have in our colleges. It would be to bring in new adults who are already in the workforce or who are not participating in the labor force, and providing them education. So we have some work to do on that in terms of numbers and real impact. We do have some work to do on that, but we will be working on that.
Will we work through WIN or some of the other things that are working with people who are unemployed?
Yes, I think Courtney's going to touch on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. Taylor, do you want to come on up? One of the things too, I think it's interesting that y'all would be interested in CHIMPS, they told y'all they were looking at, they've done a report for IHL, but they identified as the target market as well when they did their thing that one of the largest potential students is this adult student that has some certificate, some college. So this is a market that is, and then the community colleges has always identified this as one of the largest markets we need to upskill. So knowing that we have declining student population of students coming through, this is a market that we've definitely got to increase their educational level if we're going to raise our educational attainment of people. So this is one of the reasons it really fits kind of pushing that target number and that target objective. So, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all today. And as I get to talking, I think one thing I would, and I'm going to hit on it just a little bit, but what happens when they leave, but what happens if we don't educate them and they stay? They're very expensive. And so I think there's a lot to be, to sort out there because we don't want them to leave. I think I would love to see numbers on the career tech students that stay versus the academics, because I think that is very much what we are proposing when we talk about priority occupations is the career technical type students who I do believe are probably more Mississippi bound than the university transfer. But I appreciate Director Rogers' approach to funding and agree with the overall need for this program. But I also would like to offer some important discussion points that I think you guys have hit on just a little bit, but also things that I think we need to consider moving forward. As we consider funding models for education, I think it's imperative that we acknowledge both the demand and supply side of education where career technical education is concerned. I'm not talking about industry right now. I'm talking about if we're going to stem in interest with these students, which I think this program, as other states have proven, it does, is we also need to really consider, do we have the supply side stood up to be able to take those students? So I think the numbers would be controlled by the capacity of the institutions, which very frankly, for many cases right now is at capacity. And I think that has more to do with funding formulas than actual physical capacity. So I'll explain what I mean by that. But I don't think any state has figured this out, and no state has figured this out better than we can for Mississippi. And so I appreciate this opportunity and what we're trying to do and the problem we're trying to solve. I think very simply, we don't have enough humans with the skills required that we need right now. I want to avoid the conversation. I'm not trying to say we should do less for academic. We should do less for these areas. Do what we have to there. I think we should do more for these priority occupation areas as we work to recruit students, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians. We have regions of this state who are seeing unprecedented demand, but they cannot answer it. The Greenwood to Greenville, Jackson to Vicksburg, I call it a big rectangle in the South Delta with all of the things that are happening with energy and AI data centers. There's a lot of demand for construction growth. We haven't seen the supply side answer that just yet. It takes a while to turn this stuff on. You can't just bring the company and say, okay, we got it figured out. It takes some time. So I recognize that. I think as we are recognizing and encouraging students on what they need to train in, we also have to encourage our institutions to expand those programs and require it at some level. One of the things that I just cannot leave today without saying is, for whatever reason nationally, the education complex is scared of overproducing skilled trades, but not of overproducing academic degrees, which we have done as a nation for decades. We have spent decades doing this, psychology, general studies, whatever. We don't talk about outcomes, but when we start talking about the skilled trades, we will start saying things like, oh, we don't want to overproduce electricians or plumbers. Please overproduce electricians or plumbers. Let's reward them for doing this and let me and Bill Court go sit in a room with a prospective company and tell them we've got more people than you could use. That's what I want genuinely. I think I reject any notion that says we shouldn't overproduce in these areas. Now, we can't overproduce forever because it's not fair, just like on the academic side. But I do think there are some opportunities that we could use a program like this to steer people, reduce the barriers as Dr. Rogers said, right? Yeah. As Dr. Rogers says, reduce the barriers for the individual, but I also think we have to look at the supply side, meaning producing a skilled worker costs more if we're doing it right. We all know that. We've heard some conversations about that. The federal policy landscape, in my opinion, has bloated many programs with requirements that add time and cost without adding value. There's not a lot we can do to control that. We have to work within those requirements. At the K-12 level, we trap students in two-year CTE programs, even when some could move more quickly out of programs they lose interest in. We encourage sure bets at every level by starting with high achievers instead of starting with those who are likely to be interested in the career, which could be one and the same, but not always. So I recommend, as we're considering a scholarship program, that we do not limit it to the high academic achievers, but we really try to focus hard on the students to the point of navigation, to the students who want this opportunity, who need this opportunity. And I'm not just talking about socioeconomics. I mean, desire, drive, all of those things, they all matter. I think sometimes at the post-secondary level, students get steered into the wrong majors because of a lack of understanding of the difference between industrial maintenance and engineering and engineering technology. I am hopeful that our career coaching program changes this, but we still have much work to do. We have to continue to educate the masses on what these things mean. We are fortunate that we have these professionals around the state doing this work, over 200 career coaches to date, which is a significant investment and a significant improvement. We always have to be improving this program, though, to some of the points that Chairman Sullivan made yesterday. One thing where I think we get more normalized with what other states are doing was with the supports we have for adults. Your agencies, your Department of Human Services, Rehab Services, community colleges, everybody, we're working behind the scenes right now together, individuals serving in a career coaching capacity at any level, at any title, not just what we formally normally recognize as career coaches, to figure out how we can align what we say about careers, what data we need, what systems we need. How can we do that better to support all students, especially staring down the barrel of a program like this? Last week, I was in a room with leaders from several states from well-established promise type mechanisms. I think the one thing, and I'm not the expert on what everybody else is doing, but the conversations that I have heard, including Tennessee, is for the most part, these programs include everybody. They're just changing who pays for it. I think B is different, is we have the opportunity to specialize, find what works, and invest in that, and invest intelligently using scarce resources. Because what I heard from other states, a couple of other states, was we're spending out of control and we're not seeing outcomes. But that's because, in my opinion, they did not decide what problem they wanted to solve on the front end. Simply paying for college, I don't believe is the problem. I think people can figure that out if they understand what's going to happen on the back end. I do think it is a problem for a portion of our students and our adults across the nation or across the state. I think we are set up a little bit differently. We already have a longitudinal data system. So there should be an expectation that we work through this as quickly as possible to identify, is it making a difference? How is it making a difference? And also trying to design the qualitative impacts on the front end that aren't captured in quantitative data. Most of those states didn't anticipate the demand of making an entitlement exist. There is going to be demand. We are going to have a structure in place to identify the appropriate students, the appropriate people, to make sure we are spending money, to a couple of the points that were raised, spending money in areas that we actually can influence a difference in. I don't think we need to repeat the mistakes of others, so I appreciate hearing from Tennessee, and I don't think it's mistakes the way they're doing it. I think it would be a mistake if we just simply copied and pasted, which I know is not what y'all are encouraging. So I appreciate that so much. I think the reality is our funding formulas do not prioritize priority occupations or high value programs. As the Kells example with the allied health, is they get a separate funding. They have a separate funding mechanism, and those programs are expensive to produce. I don't think they're that much more expensive than industrial maintenance or HVAC or electrical. So I would encourage you all to consider looking at an additional funding mechanism that would encourage the production of those individuals as we're looking at these kinds of scholarships. Based on what at least I heard, you have a couple of years before you can show results, but you also have some time that if we just make it free without expanding capacity, we're probably not getting where you're actually trying to get, at least from what's been communicated to me. So I encourage us to look at both the demand side and the supply side within education and think about that. I think if an institution loses money, and presidents, if I get this wrong, feel free to correct me loudly, but I think if institution loses money on every single student it produces in the career technical space, which they do for the most part right now on the quality careers, I think we need to, they're going to eventually stop doing that or do less of it. And that stands to reason. So I think where we can encourage that, we should, and I don't want to continue to belabor that, but I think a combination between a reconnect and looking at the funding formula, sincerely, to echo a couple of points that Senator Sparks was making, I think would be great. As we've worked through this, I think if we could model the nursing funding into other areas for community colleges, pick the areas that matter. We can't do it for everything, nor should we. I think that may make a difference. I think I'd love to look at a Performance Plus model when we talk about funding formulas for education. Where you have some basic level of need for fixed costs, and then you bonus them for things that they're doing more of. I think what I have seen, at least in the last 4 years, is that education is pretty responsive to carrots. If we can figure out what carrots we want to feed them with, pardon the example, but maybe we can get them to respond to that. I know we need more instructors. I am a little concerned that I hear in one breath that we can pay them whatever we want, we don't need help with that. And then in the next breath, I hear we can't find instructors. So I think we have got to figure out what the problem is. And I think in some cases, the problem is simply that people are retiring from the private sector and they don't envision themselves as instructors. They did not have positive interactions with the education complex. They don't want to come back. I don't blame them for that. My dad is a 72-year-old sheet metal mechanic, and if I told him you could be an instructor, he would say, I only have an associate's degree. I cannot be an instructor, to which I would say, that's wrong. You can. So I think we need to look at that. I think we have the Encore program that we mentioned earlier to try to recruit more individuals into this, into being instructors. But there is time to do this, and I do think now is the time to do this. I think what I see in Mississippi is that we're asking the hard questions, and I think we need to continue doing that. We want to obviously celebrate our wins and do all the things, but I think creating a system that is truly aligned to the economic development needs of the state is hard, it's challenging, and it doesn't always have to be bad if things are changing. So, excuse me, my allergies have kicked off this morning, so I am done on the talking thing. But as we move forward, I would ask, or I would offer that as we're considering ways to encourage students, I think we need to consider ways to reward institutions for doing what we're asking them to do, whatever that looks like, whatever we decide what that looks like. And I also have to say, because I have heard this bubbling throughout my world, none of this is anti-academic. And that's one of the challenges that we get to when we start talking about career technical and occupational, is that feels negative to academics. What we're proposing is a world where the career technical begins to stand on its own instead of pulling from academics. But also the simple reality in all of this is I need people in my workforce who can read, reason, calculate fractions, who can use logic. It doesn't reduce the amount of academics we need. It means they need to be better incorporated into everything that we are doing. I think we need to start having conversations. If our community colleges and universities are receiving kids from high school who aren't prepared, they need to handle that at that level. I don't think that's always a legislative solution. Somebody's got to be the adult in the room. I think we need to acknowledge something uncomfortable as a state. We have told students for decades to get a degree and you will be successful, without equally being honest about the reality that success requires hard work, not just enrollment, and that the job you think you want might be aspirational. You got to figure out what jobs are here. That's where the Career Coach program can help. But as we talk about adults, I think there's things we need to do. I also think if the funding were adjusted, some of those supports, not the direct student supports, but the counseling and stuff that the community colleges provide could be increased. And maybe that's an expectation at some level. I think we should think about that. But ultimately, I think we're all aligned on this concept, at least from our conversation, that we need more of this. We just have to figure out how to get it done. And that's where that's where it gets difficult. So I don't envy you guys for having to do that. I think where we're concerned with the Office of Workforce Development is that we just want to make sure that our pipeline is aligned, responsive, honest, and accountable. And that's what we're trying to do when we bring these kinds of things to you. But I think we do pretty good when we do it together and try to solve these problems. So I would urge y'all to task us with whatever one of these problems you think we should be working on, and we're happy to do it. Thank you.
Y'all have questions for Dr. Taylor? I've got one.
Me.
As we're talking about Reconnect, as we're talking about yesterday, we were talking about performance, really performance metrics. And we've started off the day with Dr. Sullivan, Patrick Sullivan, really making sure, and he gave us kind of a thing that we needed to make sure, made a point that we needed to make sure that we were connecting workforce and academics from our colleges and community colleges. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot here. We have 8 universities. We have 15 community colleges. How many of those entities, so that's 23 altogether, how many university presidents or community college presidents have reached out to you to work with?
Mm-hmm. 2 university presidents. And I'm trying to get an accurate number, probably 5 community college presidents over the last year.
Would be 7. Okay. If you're
And just so we're clear, I don't chase people. So we work with the people who come to us who are engaged. And so that's how my board has advised me. So that's how I handle it.
Okay, so if you're listening, please make sure that you are reaching out to make sure that we are connecting these two, because this is important. I think for the last number of years here, this legislature has put a very much emphasis on trying to make sure that we are meeting workforce demands and we are aligning those, and we got to do a better job of that. So,
And in fairness, I do have to say, I am attending a meeting with all of the community college presidents at the end of January. I was invited to that yesterday. So.
okay, then Sparks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And, you know, it's a coalition of the willing. Not everybody should do everything. I don't want, just like we were talking about yesterday with enrollment, I don't want people chasing something because they think that's what the legislature wants. I want successful institutions, which means we have successful students. One of the things I just want to make clear based on, you know, the trip to DC last week, the work that you've done and repetitively going back and forth, there's going to be a change in the way money's flowing to the state of Mississippi, particularly that deals with workforce. And it may be a very good change. We always think there's a shrinking pot of money. It may be a shrinking pot of money, but it's also allowing potentially some flexibility. And I want our partners in education to know that, again, if it's a program that you think you can work with, but in the past you've had bad results and so you're not wanting to today, you know, this is a changing environment, and our community colleges particularly can be more nimble. I think our regional institutions can be more nimble, but can you talk just a little bit about what you're seeing in potentially what's available to you that's not been in the past, and to our executive agencies in these focuses? It brings DHS, MEDS, Community College Board, Rehab Services, all of them to the table.
Absolutely. What we are seeing at the federal level is welcomed, amazing, and also has to be a gut check. What the feds are saying to us is ask for waivers on these federal requirements, not for education. Y'all are not in this discussion right now, except for career technical education. Ask for waivers for what you want to see done differently, because there are a lot of regs that make no sense at the federal level. So they're asking us to ask for waivers, and the conversations we are having, and we will put these in at some point in January, if all goes well, once we decide which waivers we want to ask for, is things that allow us to be flexible as a state and encourage our agencies to spend more time working with the people who show up and less time trying to fit them into whatever ridiculous box has been described for them. I have a pretty intense distaste for boxes, even though I require them within the funding we produce at our office. But what they're saying, the feds are saying, is we've got to do this better together. And so that's what we're trying to re-envision across the board, and using these experiences, these conversations to guide it. So when the ultimate goal from the federal point of view is, if someone walks into any one of our supportive or training agencies, they can get the answer to all of the questions that they need when it comes to, how do I pay for this? What's available? How can I make all this work with my family situation? That's a heavy lift in some places, and in some places not such a heavy lift, Senator. But the expectation very much is that, very shortly, we're not going to be able to sit here and complain about what the feds will and won't let us do. We're going to have to complain about what we haven't had the stomach or the desire to change. And I welcome that. I'd much rather be disagreeing with somebody in Mississippi than disagreeing with some Fed. So there's a lot going on there. I expect that they will continue to encourage us to align WIOA and Perkins, which we have not done in the state. They are two separate entities now. In fairness, in the past, Perkins had a separate portal, had a separate review, but they wanted us to do it together. That didn't make a lot of sense. And Perkins is a federal funding formula for career technical education, specifically at the K-12 and community college levels. I suspect that they will continue to encourage us to be more flexible in that regard and to continue aligning. I am very biased when I say this, but I think Mississippi has moved leaps and bounds in aligning what we're trying to do. It's not perfect. We're not there yet. But I think we have more alignment and more people moving in one direction than a lot of states. So that's what we're seeing. I think we're going to continue to see, Senator, more pressure to do more with less. We're not getting more money directly for the things we've been getting money for. I think there could be some formula grants or some competitive grants to the states that are doing what the feds are asking of us. And so that's what we're trying to walk through now, doing what's right for our people while also setting ourselves up to receive additional funding would be the dream, I think.
Because one of the challenges WIOA funding is shrinking because we have such a low unemployment. So it's seems counterintuitive, but that's the way it's working. But one of the things I think that you've done, and Representative Holloway asked a question earlier in kind of the community college space for me, is that brick and mortar may not be the focus, but it may be the equipment that's necessary. And I know you did that recently with Northeast, with a project with Northrop Grumman. So having that flexibility, there may be an industry in your area, there may be something you can do, and maybe we can't rehab your building, but we potentially through Accelerate or through other sources can put the high-tech equipment inside the building so you don't have to spend on the equipment that allows you to focus your money on the rehab of the building. But I do appreciate you looking forward and saying, we're going to chase dollars, but not just dollars, but the results that deliver those dollars. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. One thing I would like to just quickly offer is, as we're talking about increasing the number of students we train in any of these areas, I think it's going to require all of us to examine. I have to examine my own internal bureaucracy all the time when I say, hey, training providers, I need you to do all this stuff. And they're like, well, we're spending too much time doing paperwork. So we're working on that. But I also think at every level, we have to examine, do we need a change in a schedule? Do we need to produce more people? Do we need to have more sections going? What do we need to do? And in some cases, it may be that we need to renovate a facility if we're going to change the mix from primarily academic to primarily CTE, which it's not going to happen. We're far away from that. But I do think there's all of us have to be examining what can we do where we are in our own little corner of the world to make all that stuff possible, Senator.
Yes, Dr. Taylor and Dr. Rogers, and listening to the things that you're saying, I appreciate the triangular that you drew in talking about the areas that need to be covered. And I think another thing that has to happen too is that we have to look at our poverty-stricken area and their ability to get to places to be trained, things of this nature, and try to reach out to our vocational centers to try to work with try to identify students that can be brought from their vocational facility into the community college to better train. Yeah. I found that we have carpenters, electricians, many individuals that are skilled in those areas. But you know one thing? The way they're doing it is not proper. And so what we have to do, we have to try to train them on the proper way of doing it so that we can expand. And this will help the state of Mississippi as a whole. But we need to try to focus on how we can possibly happen.
Well, one thing I would like to add there, thank you. I agree completely. The philosophy that we have taken is we have to train the individuals where they live, and we have to be ready for them to leave certain communities because they're going to have to leave. And it's not a negative all the time. They may leave for work and come home every day. And that's really what I think. I love rural Mississippi. I live in rural Mississippi. The best thing for sometimes in rural areas is to be trained there, but to be able to leave for a job. So you may drive 45 minutes for a job. Like that's not a negative. We have also adjusted our funding to allow, called the Workforce Enhancement Training Fund, to allow K-12 students to be taught in certain areas in certain states while they're in school, especially trying to work through our community college partners, because we recognize that not every kid can make it through the CTE pipeline. There's limited capacity there. What happens a lot of times is kids reach the junior or senior year and they say, oh no, life just got real. And so trying to stand up those short-term occupations, which short-term training leads to lower, on average, lower outcomes than longer-term training. So the goal isn't for them to stop there. The goal is to get them started while they're still kind of a captive audience in K-12. And I have talked to Superintendent Evans about that. He's on board with it. It just takes some time to make these things real in every community, especially our more rural communities, because what we may be asking them to train for is for jobs that aren't necessarily within their same boundary, which creates some conflict in the area. So there's a delicate balance there, but I appreciate your comments and agree.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to say, first of all, I really appreciate your critical, constructive analysis. You have giving us a pathway to greater success in our community college system. Out of the five presidents that I guess reached out to you, was there a lot of vacillating with the community, with the presidents? Were they very receptive to what you proposed to them? Because you have really clarified a lot of issues confronting the system. And I can see where those things you talked about could be very beneficial.
I will tell you that the people who choose to, well, actually, there's a sixth one, but I never called him back. I just remembered that. Sorry, Doc, he knows who he is. I just realized that. But are they open to it? Yeah, I think what people are genuinely afraid of is the negativity that traditionally comes with change. Is it can be true that we are doing okay right now, but we need to do better. All this doesn't have to be bad. They don't always agree with me, and I appreciate that. If it hasn't come across yet, and for those of you who don't know, I'm very passionate about this. I'm very direct about this. So it can be a lot for people who aren't accustomed to that. But it has been conversations are mutually respectful. They are very direct and very honest on both sides, and we don't always agree, and we shouldn't, because we serve very different purposes, and I respect that. What I respect more is honestly when the people, I don't have anybody that calls me to say, oh, this is so perfect. That's not how it works. They know not to do that. They call me to say, here's where I think you're right. Here's where I think you're wrong. And I appreciate that. So I think, yes, there's some vacillating. I think there's a lot of fear baked into all of this, especially with the approach at the federal level right now to every education. Communication is weak, including my communication. I can't get to everybody all the time. I think we should be a little bit concerned if we're in education. I think we're at a tipping point. It's a little different. I think presidents respect that, at least the ones I work with. I think they also have a business to run. We talked about, running a business earlier. They have a business to run. It's an expensive business. And it's hard to make everybody happy, from me to y'all to the general population. And so I always try to respect where they're at. I just don't always agree with it. And sometimes we just agree to disagree, and that's okay. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, I think there's some vacillating. It's not just, I had a conversation this morning. It's never just, oh, we think this is great. It's let's really dig in and figure this out.
And finally, do you have a copy of what you presented to us this morning?
I have my comments.
Your comments?
Yes, sir. And I can send anything else. If there's anything specific you want, we can pull that up. I'm just really, really bad with the PowerPoint, so y'all can be grateful that I didn't bring one.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, sir. Yes, sir. I'm going back to Zeke. I left my wife there. Huh? Well, I told, Joe Thomas and his wife, Oscar and his wife, Thomas, Ricky, and his wife.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna start back. Next on our agenda is we are going to have Brad Rowland with IHL, and he is going to present the Gordian Report and explain to y'all what the Gordian Report is. Brad, thank
Be there. I'll get started once you. Okay. Okay, good morning, members of the committee. I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to brief you on the Gordian Report, as well as some of the ways that the Office of Real Estate and Facilities is charged with managing affairs related to capital improvement projects and the overall operation of our campus buildings. As you're probably aware, in fall of 2023, the IHL board approved a 3-year contract with Gordian for facilities management services. For each IHL campus, Gordian was tasked with conducting a facilities condition assessment, developing a strategic capital plan, analyzing utilization of academic space, and performing facilities benchmarking of space, capital, and operations metrics in context with appropriate peer institutions. The goals of these services are to identify the capacity and facilities conditions at each campus and to assist campuses with data-driven decisions to, one, strategically invest in facilities to maximize the impact of available capital, and to potentially right-size the campus by decommissioning buildings. For the IHL, Gordian will annually aggregate the capital needs to single data sets to provide visibility for IHL to, one, understand which buildings and systems across the campuses have the most significant capital needs, two, to understand which buildings across the campus are candidates for decommissioning, and three, to understand the impact of campus capital plans by tracking the value of campus buildings year over year and assist with strategic investment decisions made by the campuses. To help us better understand which campus facilities are improving, Gordian delivers annual presentations to IHL leadership to review the aggregated system needs and key performance indicators related to the facilities stewardship. I'll begin this morning by giving you a overview, kind of what the Office of Facilities at IHL is responsible for. Is charged with the responsibility of managing affairs relating to the capital improvement process, repair and renovation programs, and property management. Educational Building Corporation projects, private development projects, and in specific, campus buildings, making sure they're adequately address academic needs of the institutions. Facility needs are evaluated and prioritized for funding. All funded projects are monitored and kept on schedule to optimize results for expenditures. Construction and maintenance programs are reviewed and monitored for effectiveness across all campuses, as well as charged with managing the IHL complex that has as landlord from multiple state agencies. What is currently in our system? IHL has 1,631 buildings. As you can see, that number of buildings has slowly grown over the course of the last 3 years. April of 22, we're at 1,583, 1,582, 1,609, and currently 1,631.
In turn, the square footage has also grown slightly with the addition of buildings, and we're at a little over 42 million gross square feet. We have currently 171 active construction projects with a total of $1.8 billion worth of cost that are ongoing in the system. These are projects that are funded with a combination of state funds, university funds, private donations, federal funds. So this is not strictly a list of only state-funded projects, but projects that use multiple funding sources across our system. What do we have in terms of buildings? A little bit closer breakdown of who has what. As you can see, 1,631 buildings are in the system. This is broken down both by buildings and square footage to see kind of what we're tasked with maintaining. MSU has the share of buildings at 40.28% of buildings, but when you look at, square feet, both Ole Miss and Mississippi State are fairly similar. Number of state buildings, just in comparison to what we manage versus across the state. As you can see, 1,631 buildings IHL has. The state's total, a little over 6,000 buildings. We have about 25% of the buildings across the state of Mississippi, and somewhere roughly about 48% of the state of Mississippi square footage. What do we own by age? As buildings are constructed across our system, you can see we have a profile of some of our buildings are built a long time ago. A lot of our buildings are over age 50 in terms of actual construction. Over the years, thanks to you and private donations and federal funds, we have been able to invest in these facilities and kind of change that profile a bit. So as you can see through investment, we've taken a large percentage of buildings that had over 50 years old of age and kind of reset the life cycle of those through investment. And that's really what's required to make sure that our buildings will last us many more years. A system profile of where we are. In the Gordian report, they identified there's over $2.7 billion worth of capital need within the system at this point. That's broken down into renewal-focused buildings, transitional buildings, and historic buildings. Traditional buildings are buildings that we could take offline that could be candidates for demolition, and that really helps reduce some of that deferred maintenance and backlog. Some of the renewal-focused buildings are broken down into auxiliary and E&G spaces, and you can kind of see through where those needs are. One important point I'd like to point out as you're looking at this chart, you'll see net asset value. All our buildings across our system are scored with a net asset value. Basically, it's the replacement value minus the capital need divided by the replacement value. You get a percentage of that. Capital upkeep, if you're in the 85 to 100%, we're basically at that point picking our projects instead of projects picking us, if that makes sense. As you fall a little bit lower into the 70 to 84% range, we're in repair and maintain. Not a bad position, but still, we need to pay attention to that. To get down to systematic renovation, we find ourselves in a much different situation, and then transitional, we really need to look at taking those buildings offline. Looking at the Gordian study, they produced as a capital investment target. When looking at all backlog and priority renewal across our system, their target investments is somewhere around the $130, $140 million a year range. It's important that we address the backlog. If we fail to address the backlog, that only continues to grow each year out. And so you'll see in our bond request to the legislature, we target around $130 million for the system, which is in line with what, Gordian had recommended upon their evaluation of our system needs. Gordian assessed a little over 1,400 buildings. The medical center was not part of this assessment, a little over $31.6 million per square footage. 10-year need was a little over 2.7 billion. And for the system, as I mentioned earlier about the net asset value, we're sitting at 76% for system-wide. So overall, from a system-wide perspective, our buildings are not in bad shape. We do need to invest. We're not yet to a point where we're picking all the projects on all our campuses, obviously. Some of them are starting to pick us. And so it's important that we begin to pay attention to that net asset value each year, and specifically the types of projects that we bring to you for funding and what those net asset values are. Needs for the system. There's a little bit over $1.6 billion of backlog and deferred maintenance in the system. So we talked about the 2.7 billion number. This is kind of where that's broken down, and you can kind of see what's backlog, what's coming due in the next 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, and then kind of out into the future, 8 to 10 years. But with our plans, we always like to plan well out in advance and not be as reactionary. We need to be a little bit more proactive in what we plan for, and you can see that in our 4-year bond plan, that we give you a glimpse not only as to what's happening this year, but what you can kind of expect 3-4 years out in advance. So it's important to pay attention to these type of numbers. Total needs by campus per gross square foot. You can see Mississippi Valley has the highest per gross square foot need at 108. All the way down to the University of Mississippi at 69.2. So it kind of gives us a perspective of investments made into our deferred maintenance, not only through state funds, but through university funds. And the more that's being invested, especially at the University of Mississippi, a lot is being invested, their cost per square foot is lower. So total campus backlog by campus, and then you can see by square foot again. So it kind of puts it into some perspective. MSU has 545 million of backlog, but they also have a lot of square footage. And when you're putting that up against per gross square foot, it's $52.08. And you can kind of see how that compares against the rest of the system, all the way down to Mississippi University for Women's at 49.46. Looking at backlog, what's priority, what's non-priority? So when you're looking at backlog, what has to be done now? What is backlog that needs to be addressed? But priority backlog are items that have passed their useful life and would cause a disruption to the campus if they were to fail. If we have a roof that's failing, if we have mechanical systems that are failing, things like that could really cause the universities to have to shut down academic space. In turn, classrooms aren't there for students to use. So this is kind of broken down to what has to be addressed now. All backlog needs to be addressed, but if we had to prioritize the most critical, you can see that in red. I'll give you a little bit overview by campus. And I know some of you will be interested campus by campus of what Gordian saw. So we'll start with Alcorn. Identified needs by time frame, 119 million in backlog. These are things that are going to continuously grow if they're not addressed. Another 12.8 million that's coming due 1 to 3 years, and you can kind of see the how that lays out for the future. Priority projects that were identified by Gordian. These projects were all scored across the system. And so what they did was take the net asset value that I talked to, looked at that against the type of project, and looked at that against the time frame that the project needs to be done in. And all projects were giving a score of 1 to 80. And so these are the projects over 4 million for Alcorn that have been identified as the most critical projects. And then really what makes up that project. And when we say projects, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to renovate an entire building. A project could consist of, and Gordian has broken this data out so that we can look at it from a system level and really begin to advise the universities. For example, the 16.4 at the Whitney complex, they've broken this out as what amount of that is electrical, what of that is roofing, what is that is HVAC. And so there's times where we may not need to do an entire renovation of a building. We may need to focus on the plumbing in the building. And so this kind of shows us for each campus what priority projects have been established as most critical. So I think when you start to see our bond plans going forward, you'll start to see these projects show up on those plans. Funding scenario for Alcorn.
Can you give us this example, like on Alcorn, and then you've got the materials here? I don't think we need to go through every university by thing, but if you can just walk us through using Alcorn, what we're going to see on every university.
Right. So we'll go back and look at Alcorn. What you'll see on each campus is, Gordian has identified priority projects across the system. So for each campus, every building was assessed, and priority projects won critical core components of the buildings that have issues. Backlog obviously was a major issue. So we have an idea across the system. Instead of us having a project we bring to you that says someone needs to renovate X building, we now have some concrete data that can defend the request that we're bringing before you each year in the plan. So the question comes up, instead of doing projects, are we doing the right types of projects? And that is now what we can answer with the data that we have. So also what we would show is for each school, Gordian has identified the investment that needs to be made by each school each year. So funding scenarios and what will happen if we don't make at least that investment for each school. So for Alcorn, an annual investment of $2.5 million each year would grow their backlog by 25%. So what that's telling us is that's not enough. If we have the intent of putting a dent into campus backlog, to remain neutral, at least 5.5 million. That will keep your backlog pretty steady. And if we really want to start making a dent in the backlog and decreasing it, an $8.5 million per year investment is needed. Now, that's not saying that investment has to be all state funds. That's saying what the investment needs to be made back into facility projects and R&R. And so that can be a combination of state funds, university funds, but at least that amount of investment each year is what is required. And so for every school in your PowerPoint slide, you will see what that is. And so that's kind of what drives our request into, and will begin to drive our request as we formulate capital plans that we bring to you going forward. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have at this point.
Senator Williams is going to come up. He was chair of the Public Properties, thank you, committee. Yeah, go up there so they can see you on camera so that.
Good job, bud. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you having me here. I had the privilege and opportunity to be the chair of public property this last year. And speaking to legislatures for a minute, myself, Vice Chair, Albert Butler, in the House, we had Richard Bennett and Gene Newman, Chair and Vice Chair appropriately. If you haven't had an opportunity to do this tour and you get that opportunity, I would recommend you do it. What we do is we go around, typically there are 4 trips, 2-day trips after session that we go around and tour different state physical assets. We liked it so much, we did 6 this year. But I got to go to prison voluntarily and I got to leave prison. So that was good. Not just the IHL, but we toured all 8 IHL universities and half the junior colleges, community colleges. The next year we'll tour all 8 again and the other community colleges, but it's very eye-opening to a lot of the state assets that we have in a good and bad way. Mr. Rowland here, went with him on a lot of them, very insightful. He's definitely in the weeds on what's there. I'm going to be a little bit more high level with my observations. And I think what we as a committee may have come up with, the things that we think good, bad, and ugly. One of the things that I noticed everywhere we went that I think is just amazing is the leadership in these areas, the presidents, community colleges, the universities alike, is just enthusiasm, great. Those that have great assets, those that don't, I just that energy is great. So kudos to the leadership through the community college system and the IHL system. But I want to talk about a couple things that I observed. This is Bart's words, and I just know how to say it like it is. R&R. Who in here knows what R&R is? Rest and relaxation. Repair and restoration, as I understand it. I didn't know what the word was a year ago. Industry tells us it's a physical asset, a building. You're supposed to spend 1.5% to 3% of the value of that building per year. As I've gone around, I've asked every place that I've went, what's your R&R budget? And I've almost unanimously gotten your what? Next to our human asset in our IHL and our community colleges, our biggest asset are our buildings. And I was a little setback that it wasn't the priority that it was. Some people know exactly what it is and understand what it is. In my opinion, it should be a line item on the budget. It's a number that we should shoot for. I had people tell me that we spend what you give us. I think the legislature funds about 20 to 25% of these budgets. We are not responsible for all that. So my challenge to everyone is this needs to become a priority, because when you kick the can, illustrated by what Mr. Rowland's telling us, we're going to make $100, $200, $500, $1,000. It's not linear, it's exponential. If we don't fix roofs and we don't take care of buildings, we have a problem. So I think it needs to become a priority at the local levels. And we've heard all the funding doesn't come from us. So that to me was a big thing, that we did not have that really at the priority that we should at every location that we went to. Another thing I noticed when we're looking at capital X projects, buildings of that nature, some universities feel that the state should fund 100% of that. Some universities did not. What I found is that 20 to 40% local money, when I say that, non-state money, allows us to leverage state assets, and we get more bang for the dollar. And as I like to say it, when I have the locals ask me for project money, I said, what are you going to do? Well, how much you bringing? Skin in the game. You got to have skin in the game with this. If an institution does not have the ability to have skin in the game, there's deeper concerns. We don't have community involvement. We don't have philanthropy. We don't have things that are a big concern that I think we need to think about. And I think that should be a common conversation as we as legislatures go forward with our institutions in our districts and talk to them about that. They need to be bought into this. They just have circumstance that maybe we can help work on them. If they're, if they're in our district and you got a community college, you got a university, help them do that. I would challenge you to do that. Another thing that jumped out to us was we have a lot of buildings that are vacant. As Mr. Rowland said, some that need to be taken offline, in my words, torn down. We've got various reasons they're not there. We're going to come forward with a demolition bill, we're going to call it this year, would allow us to look at buildings that did not have significant historical events. We're not wanting to take down buildings of historical significance, but we have a lot of buildings that, to use Hawley's term, demolition by neglect. It's going to sit there until it gets so bad that it has to come down. For that building to sit there, it takes money every year for it to sit there. At Ole Miss, they've got a building that they want to take down. There is no historical significance to the building, but they're handcuffed and cannot do that. And it's in the middle. They want to put an accounting building. They're ready to do it. It's something they need, and they need to do it now. This is all across the system, not just in IHL and community colleges, but across state. So we hope to do that where there'll be a vetting process. Don't get me wrong, but we can work that a little bit easier. And we're talking probably a couple hundred buildings across the system that we're looking at the very least that we need to do. Another thing that jumped out as we did the tour is we sent out a questionnaire before session was over and before we started the tours, is we've got universities, and I challenge IHL specifically to look at this, where we have unused space. What I mean by that, we had one university that's using 65% of their space. Now the 35% that's not used, I challenge, tell me why you're not using it. Is it, obsolete? We've got dormitories that we're never going to put people in. Anybody saying Subtle Hall? 8 guys, 1 bathroom. People aren't gonna do that today. That's an economically obsolescent. We can't rehab that building. It needs to come down. But challenge that. I'll go to university where we've got 65% capacity, and then we've got classes being taught off campus. So I don't understand that. Those are things that we need to dig into and understand. Are we using our space as efficiently as we can? And on the other side, they're wanting a building for something. Not saying it's not valid as we go forward. The last thing I want to say, Madam Chair, is an observation, not necessarily a public property observation, but we're on a ship that's sailing toward an iceberg. And if we change course now, it's going to hurt less than if we change course next year. What does that mean? We've talked about it all. I don't know. I know after going on all these tours, I do not advocate for closing a single institution. I do advocate for conversation, consolidation, and not being siloed like we are. I think we've got a lot more of that than we need. We've got to collectively figure out what the path forward is. The enrollment cliff is real, and it's coming a lot quicker than we know, which will accelerate the demise of things if we don't proactively figure out a plan. So for what that's worth, that's just an observation that I've got. But again, I want to say kudos to the leadership in the facilities, not just the presidents, but their staffs, just the way they welcomed us, but just they're bought into the mission of serving the students. And I think that's an asset. You know, our number one asset's our people in our state. So I definitely saw that.
Okay, thank you. I've got some questions and I know our committee does too. First question is, if we had a university where 65%, we were only using 65%, and that is of the main campus, do y'all have data that shows why we're not using that other 35%?
We do, and it's part of the Gordian study that we'll be getting information in the first part of 26 is part of a space utilization component. And so that will really take a deeper dive into what's being used, what's not being used, and how to better write the space allocations on our campus. So Gordian is taking a deep dive into that. That was part of our challenge to them when we entered the contract with them, was to dig deeper into exactly how space was being utilized on the campus. And if there's space not being utilized appropriately, how can we better utilize, maximize what we're doing? If we're not utilizing, again, we don't need to be building new buildings, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask both of you on this. Explain to the committee the consistent problem that we've had with archives and history, and what that some buildings that needed to be rehabbed or needed to be torn down. Just bluntly
Okay.
explain it to
Well,
me.
as I understand it, I'll do this. First, let me say this. When I entered the public property sector, and my initial inclination was archives and history handcuffs us on everything. Let's tear everything down and build over. I do not feel that way. They're great people over there. We had some concerns that people approached me with immediately. I put all the stakeholders in the room. We fixed the concerns, okay, just by having a conversation. And there's a space for archives and history and preservation. And I've got to see buildings where the balance has been there between the economics, the preservation, functionality, all those things work. And believe me, I will defend that. Between the 50s and 60s, we had an era where we put a bunch of, art term, junk buildings up that need to come down. There were these box buildings post-World War II. They were built cheaply. But when you get to that 50-year threshold, as I understand it, now you get under that umbrella of protection of being a historical landmark. So that's one of the cloaks we want to look at taking off. There again, we vet the building to make sure there wasn't a historical event. And no offense, if you met your wife there, it's historical to you, but it's not to the state of Mississippi. Okay? You know, I was endeared to Malfunction Junction, but Mississippi State's a lot better that it's not there, right? But those components there, as we look at it, that's where I think that is. And again, the folks at Archives and History do a great job. We've got preservation throughout. And we found things on the tour that we need to preserve. Some of it pretty good economics. We need to figure that out. But there again, to go back to the Ole Miss illustration, the building's is obsolete for the purposes that the university wants to use it for. And you know, accountancy is one of their big things. It's right at not an Ole Miss graduate, so the center, the square, whatever it is. If it comes down, I mean, just what it can do and how it can transition the campus is tremendous. So does that help? It's not an exact answer, but taking the handcuffs off, if you will, and allowing it not open a window to demolition, anything that somebody wants. You've got a 1892 building, we're gonna preserve that building.
So I've got a few questions and I had to write a few of these down because unfortunately we've spent the last year in an NCSL study committee, actually the last 3 years, discussing deferred maintenance and what it's doing across the United States. First off, one of the questions I've got for you is what percentage of a new build should be set aside for the R&D or the deferred maintenance on that? Number two, and before I even throw all this out there, number two, are we putting in place a plan to require any new build to include that deferred maintenance plan? And I know the answer to that one. And number three, I would ask why on that one, and then I've got a follow-up after that.
Okay. On new buildings, always, 1.5 to 3% needs to be set aside. That's an annual, should be going back into your facility to budget. All of it may not need to be used in year one when you build a new building because everything is fairly new. But by the time you get to year 10, obviously you've got issues. Then you have roofs that come due and you have plumbing that comes due. Some of those are 30, 40 year out issues. But it doesn't mean we don't need to budget for that. And so as part of our emphasis with the Gordian study, we're making a strong emphasis to our campuses to begin to do that very thing.
Okay, and I think Senator Williams, did you have something to respond to that?
Mr. Rowland says that they have emphasized doing that 1.5 to 3%, I think, is a piece that needs to be there. What, again, in my observations, in my opinion, what's happening is CapEx or bond money, R&R money is kind of grouped together. And oh, wow, if we can get $3 more million for this building, we can build it. No one's told me they've done that. I'm drawing a conclusion of what I think's happened. It's a function of priority because, as I said, kicking the can, you got a 25-year life on a roof, and when you're 27 and it's not leaking, it's got to be a conscious effort. I'm going to advocate for us as a legislature to put a separate item and a requirement. If you want CapEx money, you want bond money, you've got to use an R&R metric, a rule that formula we put in, and the accountability measure on the back end of it.
And I think that's very much where we're headed because the best practices adopted by that study committee on NCSL was for the implementation of a plan as such for any new build. And nobody wants to hear that, but it's where we need to be headed at the end of the day because this is for our generations to come. And that's what we're facing at right now.
We've got some tens of billions of dollars of physical assets, and we've got to preserve them. This is not just true in this space; it's statewide, and we need to do that and put the priority on it there. Because if the roof leaks, just imagine the damage. Systems, functionality, all those things come into that, and we just got to be proactive in doing it. And again, I'm not trying to paint a bad picture. I mean, everybody's got a budget, and you cut where you cut. I may not replace the roof on my house this year because I got to replace the air conditioner, but we've got to make it, I think, a higher priority than it's been.
And I agree with that. And I appreciate your work on that, Senator, because I want to be sure to everybody knows that I'm not just picking on IHL. This is a statewide problem. This is a national problem, and we've got to fight it as a whole. Now, the next question I've got is going to be regarding any monies that we've got set aside right now, waiting for additional monies to do our builds. Do we have a substantial portion sitting out there right now that's just waiting? That's just something I've heard some rumor and rumblings about.
Some institutions do. The objective of why we do a 4-year bond plan is to complete projects. I do not really advocate to hold money for multiple years. When I say multiple, 4, 5, 6 years. One, the price of construction continues to go expensive, and what we may have gotten or thought we were going to get for that project is no longer sufficient to do that project. Two, we need to find ways to do projects. And when I do the 4-year bond plan, I like to make sure projects are no more than a 3-year funding cycle on very large projects. Smaller projects, we need to make the plan work together so that projects are starting and complete, and that none of our institutions are holding money for any long periods of time.
So how do we balance that? Because my problem is if we've got half of project funding sitting over here and we're very discouraged about receiving the additional, but we've got R&D needs at an institution, or we've got, roofs or, you know, I've gone to Alcorn and visited theirs and seen the concerns they've got there. I've been to others. How do we balance that, or how do we justify that when we're holding money and we've got substantial needs setting at a university?
In my opinion, we have to be very that we allocate. I think we're putting it in a bucket. As I went around, there's several institutions that are sitting on large sums of money waiting on the remainder of the funding. As I mentioned a moment ago, I think some need to have bake sales. What I mean by that, skin in the game. Let's find this out, get community involvement, all those things. You know, we smile, but it's real. I mean, if the locals aren't involved, and when we have distant future, it's going to be about local involvement or lack thereof. I think that's part of it. So we've got to do that to get them. But in questioning, as I did people pretty hard, there was an expectation, as I received it from this last session, that completion of funding for some of these bigger projects would have been done, as we know didn't happen. If we as a legislature are giving that impression, and we shouldn't, we need to be, again, as I said, more intentional about, you know, within major universities, there's some major things that are not just new buildings that were expectations. And if we gave that as a legislature and communicated, intended to, fine. If we didn't, we need to be intentional in saying, we hope to do this next year, but we don't know that we will. And again, just my observation and talking to them. And I think had we had a typical funding year, we wouldn't have quite the tranches of money out there. But there again, going back to my premise earlier, are we going to fund 100% of it or not? And trying to have the expectation of the local dollars, you know, we heard mentioned federal, philanthropy, private, local, all those things coming in to do a percentage. We need to be intentional about saying, okay, there's a $50 million building. We might get you 30. Y'all need to figure out the rest, whatever that number is. And I just don't know if that has been ambiguous or interpreted or assumed.
Thank you, Senator, for your hard work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for initiating all of this research. And thank you, Brad, for.
And your input too. He was on the tours. He's very indispensable as well.
Yes, well, thank you. And this is a very comprehensive report, and I can really appreciate this. But I want to know, looking at all of the 8 institutions, what is the average cost of backlog? What is the average? Because I see some with 500 and some millions, some with 200 million. And just, do you have an average?
We can get you an average. Each school's just different in terms of backlog that's, you know, on that campus. It's a unique profile. And some have kicked the can down the road many more years than others. Some are more proactive than others for various reasons. And so backlog is going to differ, situations differ. Just looking at an average across the system, we can get you that number. They haven't produced us an average, but we can get that for you if that.
Okay, because based on just, I guess my mathematical analysis is it would be somewhere between, on the average, maybe 90, $100 million.
Yeah, I mean, if you took the 1.6 billion and kind of, you know, put it across the system, now take into consideration that does not include the medical center. So that number could go up because they were not part of this as a medical facility.
Okay, so also, did you look at the cost of, I guess, abatement to some of the buildings for demolition? Have you looked at the total cost?
No, we haven't looked at the cost of that because it'll just, I mean, that's more of a project specific number. So as we get ready to identify which buildings we want to take offline, I believe there was somewhere Gordon identified some 155 buildings or so that were candidates to be taken offline. So as you look at different buildings, that number is really, you got to look at multiple things, really. Asbestos abatement would be one. Has the building had water infiltration? Do we have any mold issues in a vacant building that, it's just been sitting there with no airflow or whatever it may be. So really mold and asbestos would be the two cost numbers, but we don't have a number on what that would be for every building because we haven't assessed it to that point.
And kind of going through that in my mind, if we can have success with our demolition bill, and let's just say for sake of argument, we've got 155 buildings to be demoed, it allows us to probably apply economies of scale. We can probably talk to a contractor or put it out for bid. It's like, okay, we got you 5 years worth of work. Here it is, and probably save, I don't know, a big percentage over piecemealing the buildings is what we've done. We went to one university and it took $2 million to take a building down. I think if you had an entity that was geared to do that, was proficient in dealing, mitigating these hazardous issues, you could do that. I'm going to say for half. I don't know what the number is, but there could be a good savings. So there's another advantage if we can look at going that approach. The other side of legislation being passed, I'm going to advocate with DFA to do that.
One other question. So are ongoing projects reflected in this report?
Yes, any ongoing project is reflected in that report.
Okay. Okay. So, I guess, the last question would be, so we said it could possibly cost anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million just to demolish a building.
Easily or more.
Okay. So do you have any information on how many, buildings are being used or utilized at every university? Because even though some universities, you may have 118 buildings, they're all being utilized in some capacity. And then you have others that may have buildings that's not being used at all.
We do. We have a vacant building report and we have a plan for the university's plan for those vacant buildings, whether those are for demo or for renovation. So I've got a list of that and I can provide that.
But it's not reflected in this report.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you for this comprehensive report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it. I would also, though, encourage the board to be looking at some of the things that Senator McCon brought up as y'all are doing your budget, but these things need to be incorporated into board policy. It doesn't take net legislation sometimes. These are the things that can go in board policy. And so I think he brought up a really good point in future budgeting and all of that. So I would encourage IHL to kind of take some leadership on this. So thank you very much. This is an incredible report. Yes, sir. Okay, you've got one question? I'm so sorry.
And I'll be very brief. There were some things that were cleared up for me. There are oftentimes money is held because of the Bureau of Buildings taking too long to approve. So I'm just wondering how we're going to approach that situation.
How do we approach with the time lag on some of that?
Yes.
The Bureau and DFA hold the contracts to that. So that's really their projects in terms of that. So, I mean, I really can't speak to
That's
that.
a good question. In 25 session, we did CMAR, the construction manager at risk bill, which would alleviate that and take it away from that. We've also got a design bill that we did. As we talk to IHL and the people in community colleges as well, we're trying to, lack of a better term, loosen up in certain applications with that. Simultaneously, we're trying to work with DFA and BOB and speeding up the process in there. They've got some systems that, they've got some good people now. Don't think that they don't, because I've gone in and spent a lot of time with some very good people there, but we got some systems and processes that need to be created, that need to be more efficient, and that's aware. So kind of working it from both sides. As we talk about loosening up and allowing projects to be done outside of DFA, you got to be careful. As I mentioned, we've got 50-year-old buildings that built in the 60s, 70-year-old buildings that were not built of good quality construction. I think we had Alcorn, we had a brick issue because someone didn't inspect the contractor. There's a layer of protection there with that. Yes, it's time and yes, it's money. There's a place for all this. It needs to be vetted. It just can't be the wild, wild west, in my opinion. So those are very good questions, trying to address them from a regulatory component within DFA and then from a statutory component with the bills that I just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. As we go forward, I just wanted to make sure, because there are presidents at these universities that really want to,
Yes,
be right.
it's a valid concern.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank y'all very much. If we'll have our next speakers, please. This is Jean Massey and Courtney Taylor. Last year in the legislative session, I know the House passed through financial literacy for high schoolers. We actually passed it through in the Senate. It died in conference reports. And so I think that bill will be introduced again, probably in both chambers. But as we were looking at a number of factors, it became very apparent to us that financial literacy is also needed in the higher ed level. And so this is something that MEC and we see in workforce development as one of the things that I always say is I go into industries in my area and I say, what can the state help you with? And they say two things. Childcare is one. But the second thing consistently you see is they need help with their employees really understanding financial literacy, whether it be understanding their pension, whether that they're not banked, and all different kinds of issues. So we will be looking at some legislation that will manage literacy at our colleges and universities and really at every level. So whether you be a career tech student or you be looking at a degree, you will be looking at some requirements in the future for financial literacy. And so to kind of further explain this, Jean, take it away, please.
Thank you. And thank you for having us today. Thank you for that setup because it was perfectly leading into this of the why this is important. In October, we had the Ascent to 55% conference. You have on your table some information. There's been some discussion today about Ascent to 55%. I'll kind of go through that a little bit. But at our Ascent conference, you were able to attend, Senator Boyd, some of you members were able to attend, and it became very evident through the presentations from our local and from our national leaders that we have a couple of issues that if we're really going to move our state forward, we need to address. One of those is around data collection, and I'm going to let Dr. Taylor really get into that more than me. But the other was, and you've mentioned this several times over the last couple of days, it's not just about attainment. It's about attainment that allows an individual to be successful after they complete their certifications. Whether it's a credential of value, as we want to call it, an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or doctor's degree, but how am I going to be successful after that? So one of the areas that really came forward during the conference and that you've already discussed last year is financial literacy. And it's financial literacy for all students, not some, but all. And how do we enhance their education and align this employment choices with what the state workforce needs are? When you really look at Ascent to 55%, you heard from Dr. Allen yesterday, this goal of 55% by 2030, 60% by 2035, which was established in 2020 by the Education Achievement Council, really also looks at how financial literacy can help move us forward in this post-secondary attainment. You heard Dr. Allen talk about really looking at what the Education Achievement Council, so let's be honest here, 60% by 2035 is not enough. 65% of our jobs, and some calculations say even up to 75% of our jobs are going to need post-secondary attainment. So how do we start looking at it? Senator Harkins asked a little bit ago, where are we currently? We're at 48.7%. The state, the nation is at 54.9%. That puts us about 6 percentage points below the national average. Now, we've made big strides. We've gone from 40% in 2020 when we first started this, but we've got to move forward. And it's not just about the high school students. We will never get to this if we're depending on just that number. It's that 300,000 that are in the work that are in our state that have some college credit and no degree. It's that almost 300,000 that have no high school diploma. How do we bring all of them in? How do we educate them? If you look at the numbers, you see the breakdown, and you have this PowerPoint so you can see it also. If you see the breakdown, you see the number of associates and the number of credentials. An area that concerns us with our data is the actual number of credentials. We know we have more than 9.9% of our individuals in this state with a credential. Where do we get the data and how do we make it so that we can use it in a way to inform decisions that we can make? So I'm gonna let Dr. Taylor talk about that in a few minutes. One of the areas that we do know that we're making progress in, those numbers are for adults 25 to 64, 65. When you break it down and look at our individuals from 25 to 34, 52.9% of them have a credential of value. Whether it's that workforce credential, associate degree, or bachelor's degree, that's only 2 percentage points below the national average. So we're making progress, but we're not there, and we need to make it faster and more to get to where we need to be to meet our state needs. So this brings us to the point that we're talking about financial literacy. What does financial literacy have to do with this? Mississippi's future depends on not only hard work and determination that we've talked about earlier, but on knowledge. And one of the most critical forms of knowledge is financial literacy. Too many of our people step into the adult carrying debt that they don't understand, making choices that can affect them for decades. So when you look at this slide and when you think about it, when incoming students have been surveyed about their knowledge of financial literacy, you will notice that only about 2 out of 6 have a basic knowledge of financial literacy. You also see that about 40% to 45% at our 4-year and our 2 years have ever taken a course. Now, this is beginning to change in Mississippi because it's now a requirement, but it's going to take time to see those results. And I can tell you as a high school principal, former, what you tell kids in high school goes in one ear too many times and out the other. And when they actually have to put it into work, it's not there. So how do we take it forward? And we really need to look, it's not just about, and we'll talk about in a minute, our student debt loans, but it's much more, it covers a lot more than that, with the borrowing that our individuals do that really affect where they are and where they're going. So let's be clear, when we talk about college today, we're talking about everything after high school, whether it's workforce training, whether it's community colleges, whether it's our IHLs and our 4-year. We're talking about all students involved in these problems, these issues. When you look at what is happening in Mississippi right now, and these numbers will be discussed much further in the next presentation that you have after us. But if you can see here, Mississippi has an average loan debt that equals about 56% of our state's median income. The highest ratio in the nation. This means that the debt consumes more than half of a graduate's what they earn in their first year. So year one, whatever they're getting paid, over half of it is already taken up in our student loans. You can see from these numbers that we have about 14.3% of our 15.5% that have a default rate. This is the second highest in the nation. Then we have 22.3% that are delinquent. That's 60 days or more. They're paying, but they're behind. And we all know when you get delinquent, that means you're adding more finance onto it and you're having to pay more. So as we look at this and where we are, our debt to GDP per capita, we're highest in the nation. So we need to be ready to really look at what we're doing, because let's be honest about the reality in Mississippi. Our median household income is about right at $55,000, far below the national average. Yes, our cost of living may be lower, but in the meantime, that means that every dollar that we earn has to mean more and be to carry further. So as we begin to look and think about this, the young graduates from one of our college who wants to start out when they graduate, their dream is to start a small business, but most of the time, or a lot of time, they can't even qualify for a loan because of these debts that we're seeing. It's not just these debts, and that's why I said at the beginning, this is not just about the numbers you see here about financial literacy. Here's a huge issue in our state. Post-secondary financial literacy is not just student loans, it's equipping all students for life. Financial literacy is more than student loans. In our state, payday loans, and I know that you as a legislature have looked at this and taken it up, but they have high interest rates of over 400%. One wrong step in this can actually affect a family for life. So as we start looking at this, we have high concentrations of lenders. Y'all, we have over 1,000 licensed payday lenders. We have more payday lenders than we do McDonald's in this state. A lot of times our individuals that get into this get into traps. But let's really look at it at the bottom line, that human impact. How does it impact the individuals and the borrowing and what they can do? I was told a story just before I came up here about payday loans and what people know and about their family. I was talking with an individual from Mississippi Delta College, and he was telling me that in their area at Mississippi Delta, this is a huge issue. He said he started asking the individuals why they were taking the payday loans, and they said, that's the only thing my family has ever known. So we talk about breaking cycles. We need to look at how financial literacy at the post-secondary level can help break this cycle. One of the other areas that you mentioned earlier was employees. We were able early in November with Dr. Taylor had asked us to assist with the Atlas meetings, and that's accelerated training and livelihood meetings to inform the state workforce plan, WIOA. We conducted 8 of these across the state with over about 800 different people coming. We really wanted to hear from business and industry during these meetings. One of the questions that we asked was, over the next 5 years, what trainings and education do you believe potential employees should possess to increase their value to business? In all 8 meetings, financial literacy came forward. What the employers were saying was, our employees, and a lot of times these were people from workforce, do not have the skills not to chase a job that goes from $5.50 an hour to $5.55 an hour. You know, they're chasing that dollar. How do we help educate them? You mentioned several other things at the beginning that they were interested in. Mr. Freeze told me when the Delta, he said, we're already doing some literacy, and you'll see some of this in this form. But he said, he said, the reason we're doing this is I had an employer that we were training linemen for. And he said, on day 1 of linemen, they show up for the job when we hire them in a brand new $100,000 truck that doesn't match what their salaries are going to be. How can you help us before they come to us, before they get into these issues? So as we start looking at this, how do we help in a number of different areas? I think what we've got to do, excuse me, we've got to empower our students. Right now in Mississippi, we've made strides. Every high school student is required to take a personal finance. But what happens after high school is they step into the college, and for the first time, they're faced with rent. They're faced with credit card debt. They're faced with loan repayment, and everything they learned has gone away, and they need to have this to fill in those gaps. Excuse me. The supports that were there are not there anymore. So how do we bring those supports back? How do we make sure that literacy at post-secondary is important? How do we address these debt challenges? How do we look at integrating financial literacy? This doesn't need to be a one-size-fits-all. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But the big thing is, what are the benefits that this can do for the student? Because we've talked about student success, but we're also talking about success for our state. So with focus on student success, it brings it with benefits, not just to the student and not just to the student's family, but it also benefits our state's economy, excuse me. So as we start looking at this, what are some answers? What can we do to empower students for financial success? How can we really look at what we can do to make things better as we move forward? Some of our current challenges that we have in this, we don't have a mandated piece for financial literacy at post-secondary level. We have different institutions doing different things, but what is it really needed? How do we make sure that we close these gaps we've talked about today? And how do we address the disparities that we see? And where it's really needed the most to help? And how do we help reform the system that we have? How can we partner with different organizations out there? Do we need a course? What do we need that gives us practical answers to move forward? How can we address those issues? We can partner with local credit unions, banks, nonprofits to provide expertise and mentorship. We can give students access to digital tools and tracking, spending, monitoring credit, and other financial pieces. These aren't abstract ideas. These are things we can actually do to make forward and move to go. What you see on the screen at this time, there is not a state in our country that has a mandated post-secondary financial literacy. There are different institutions that have mandated at their institutions. There has been no one way that they have implemented, but you can see some examples of what they're doing and how they're bringing them in. Y'all, our state is doing things. This is not the only things that are going on. These are just some examples of what our colleges and universities are doing to help this world. Now, there's a couple of different pages here. Despite good intentions, we can do more and we can move forward. You can see on both pages where our individuals are. You heard about FAFSA. Our FAFSA is #1 in the nation. That's one of the top indicators of how individuals go to college or enter college. Now, being #1, if we're going to get them there, you mentioned yesterday, 38% after year 1 dropping out. How do we make sure that we keep them there, have the financial literacy to move forward? Here's some examples of things that we can do. Now, the one thing I want us to be sure of, we do not need to mandate to the post-secondary, this is how you do it. We need to let them know these are the things that need to be taught. We need to put together a group that can look at what resources are out there, how we can move forward with this, and give them the ability to help with our students. So as we go forward, what you see are some examples of what we can do, but we don't need to put a one size. We need to give choice and we need to give opportunities to move forward. In closing, before I turn this over to Dr. Taylor, I would like to just make sure that you understand, this is not my sign like you with the sinuses, they're getting tough. I apologize for that. But let's be sure that we are doing the right thing for our students. Let's make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we move this state forward economically through success of our students. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Taylor at this time.
Hello again. So thank you for the opportunity to chat about this a little bit. I'm going to start for a minute and talk about credentials, and I promise I will wrap it as quickly as I can into financial literacy. But Jean highlighted two important issues that I think matter deeply to Mississippi's future, which are very simply accurate data and real financial literacy. I think those two do interestingly go hand in hand. They are directly tied to our ability to build a workforce that meets Mississippi's economic development needs. I'm proud of Mississippi's attainment goals. I think improving from 44 to 48% is great. It's real progress. It does mean more Mississippians are earning degrees and credentials. It would not be on brand if I didn't have a but though, right? But And to echo Jean and to a little bit of what she said, if we don't focus our efforts more strategically, we will end up with more credentialed people, but their credentials will be misaligned with the labor market. And that is something we are working on diligently across the Business Alliance, across Work Future, community colleges, a lot of different people, because what we recognized a few years back was we need the appropriate credentials in the appropriate regions aligned to actual jobs. That is the goal, but that is also the challenge because industry will sit at the table with you and say, you know what? I need them to pass a drug test and show up. And they can do that and they won't hire them. So we have to be fair about this as we're working across this and diligent about it and very honest in saying at some point, not every credential is worth something. And we want to invest in the ones who are. So as we've worked through this, we talk a little bit about data. We are working to better track things, but there is no easy way to track credentials associated with an individual. We can tell you what programs are produced. We can tell you that we are producing, like at the K-12 level, X number of a certain credential. At that point, we cannot align it to the person once they leave. So we can't look back in a few years and say, oh, that person got this credential, unless we just make assumptions out of a program that they also got that credential. The same is true for K-12 and community colleges. Our WIOA partners have a way to track measurable skills gains through credentials. So we're working to keep improving our data system to be able to align that specifically for non-credit training. I'll let the other side worry about how they do it in that world, but getting our non-credit individuals who are going through short-term training programs, giving us the ability to examine, did it make a difference? We can already do that from the program in general, but being able to I guess, deep dive into the credential and saying, is that worth the investment? Is it worth the time? Sometimes credentials can inflate the time programs take. So we have to be careful with that. What we can do today, like most education, is track the programs and what credentials are attached to the program. So that's a start. We're just not quite there yet. The goal is to be able to tie credentials to individual records. So basically, if an economic development prospect comes in and we say, not only did 300 people enroll in a welding program, we had 200, these are made up numbers, but we had 212 who earned that AWS credential that we think is important based on the competencies you need. So that could be transformational in our economic development approach. I think better data in general helps us sell Mississippi, but better data alone does not do anything. This is why we continue to preach regional alignment and alignment in general. Some regions need more jobs, others need better jobs, but every region needs training aligned to its labor market, not aspirational pathways connected, not aspirational pathways disconnected from economic reality. This year is the first time that we have workforce non-credit training data in the same system as our WIOA partners. So for the first time, we're going to be able to really dig deep and look at things that we just haven't been able to look at before. What those things are is to be determined because we're trying to figure out exactly where do we need to make changes in what we're capturing? How does it align? Because they are a different system, but it's a great starting point, and I'm proud of my team for getting that handled. In Spark, the community colleges, everybody's been at the table to try to help us figure this out. You guys actually have provided the funding that allowed that to happen, so thank you. But to connect it to student debt, and I think the link is direct, and I am obviously biased when I say this, but when we think about the default rate that Jean shared, I think through a workforce lens, there's a question and questions we have to ask. Are our students defaulting at a higher rate because they're not educated in areas where the labor market actually needs them? I don't know. I have not studied this topic, so I'm not the expert, not trying to pretend to be. I think the data lags. So these weren't necessarily students who received a few years of career coaching, but maybe this needs to be a metric we utilize for career coaching. I don't know. I'm going to let Blaze work on that in our office. I don't think defaulting is always as simple as that it's irresponsible. They don't want to pay. I think sometimes it could be that they're misaligned and they just aren't able to. So if we can make improvements to where we align on the front end, maybe we can also help, there's multiple approaches that need to be taken here. We don't want students earning credentials, and we don't want to prioritize credentials in fields with low wages. We should make those as simple and easy as possible to get, and we should move on. I don't believe financial literacy can be treated as a side project. I think it has to be really intentional. I think Jean made a valid point that we require financial literacy in high school, but the support kind of stops there. And I think we've all had that oh no moment where we learned something, we forgot something, and then we need something. And we're like, I cannot remember what I learned. And I think, and you said this, Jean, I think that's what's happening to kids. They learn it outside of the context when they actually need it and get it. So I think it's a timing mismatch more than it's just a simple providing it or not providing it. So I think I urge caution in just simply saying, make it available. I think we also need to make it timely and close to when the student would be making these decisions. I think maybe we have it in the 10th grade in the college and career readiness class, but maybe there's also a website that they can go to anytime when they start doing an internship or something like that. Because what they're going to face is student loans and rent and predatory lenders. Credit cards are just as predatory as everybody else. You can get a credit card with no income, makes no sense. But these are financial decisions they've never practiced. So if we can align the learning to be kind of just in time with making those financial decisions, I think we'll all be better off. There is no reason why we cannot offer short online senior year or freshman year, junior, whenever, financial literacy refreshers as requirements, and some things. I also think as adults, we need to have real talk with our students in every program. I don't think we need to just have standalone. I think our educators need to be educated on how to talk about this, not as I don't need them checking any more boxes. That's not what I'm suggesting, but getting accepted into college is not enough. You got to do work when you get there, and you got to do something that people want to pay you for. Otherwise, you're getting education for the sake of education, which most of us cannot do. I think getting a good job is not enough. You've got to learn how to manage your money. And someone needs to tell everybody this directly. I think in a perfect world, our parents would be doing this. In many cases, they don't know either. And so it's the blind leading the blind. So I think that is a tough deal, is how much does the state take on versus how much do we push back on? I don't know. But I think if we move forward with financial literacy reform, which I hope we do, I think it's got to be aligned across the system. We can't teach one version in high school, one version in community college, one in universities, and one for our non-credit programs. We have some successful models. We have Smart Start out there right now. It is long and it takes a good time investment, but Jones College has gotten this online. So there's already some models. I am not suggesting that I know enough to tell you they are tackling what we need. I am saying there's an infrastructure there that I think we could borrow for this. I think adults in non-credit programs have to be included in this as we talk about Workforce Pell, which is coming down the pipe. It's not going to be a big program, but it is a new additional funding formula. People are going to be getting grants. They need to know whether they should take that short-term grant, which is going to count against them, or if they should take a longer-term grant. It's going to be different for every student. These are complicated things to solve that most of us didn't have to solve when we were 16 or 17, and we're asking our 16 or 17-year-olds to figure this out today. I think as we look at it, we want Mississippians building wealth. I think everybody can agree with that, not just earning a paycheck. Wealth is not income. It's the ability to manage that income. So this goes much deeper than just being good with getting, not getting overrun by lenders, but it's also making really strong, good wealth choices. And I think it should be in reach for every Mississippian, but I encourage us that I don't necessarily know if we need a new financial literacy program, or if we just need to better align what we have and expand who we're offering it to. I think if our system is truly aligned, we have financial literacy that's driven and given at the right time. We have credentials that are tracked accurately and accountable in some way. We have training that aligns to regional labor market needs and it's visible. We have institutions who are incentivized to produce high demand talent. We have adult and youths who have access to all of these financial tools. And our data system supports real-time decision-making across education and workforce. That is aspirational, but it is what I think we are all working towards and talking around at some level. So I think if we want to reduce loan defaults, which I think we do, if we want to build stronger families, if we want to do all those things, I do think those things are good for us to want to do. And I think they help us grow economically, not just academically, and not just with our attainment rates, but also with our ability to flourish from those. So I'm going to stop talking now, and Jean and I welcome your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative, you've got a question? Did you tell me? Come on.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dr. Taylor, I think if we had buzzers around this table, they all went off today because your presentation has been just amazing. And thank you for enlightening us. I saw the chair lady over there smiling, so that tells me you drove it home. With that being said, you know, it reminds me of the No Child Left Behind Act. And we're doing everything in our power to make sure this happens. So I just want to say thank you. And I think what you need to do is you need to come to our districts. I think it'll be a great thing to have you in our districts so our constituents can hear this. Thank you again.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, again, these presentations, just like everybody reiterated, you know, these are some hard numbers and we need to know it. You know, one thing, the only way you can resolve something is put the truth out on the table, good, bad, and ugly. That's the way I look at it. Now, just look at this, you know, if you kind of roughly look at default ratio and delinquency ratio, that's roughly showing your default or delinquency, about 1 out of 2 graduates are in that position. Debt to income ratio, 123%. I was looking at some numbers. I think we're approaching just nationally, we're probably approaching double digits on seriously delinquent credit. And I think it's become second nature for us to charge things. We're to the point, if you don't really pay attention, you're paying interest. That's money you can invest in your family and things you need. Just like one of my rule of thumb, you don't ever charge any consumable. You don't pay interest on consumables, gasoline, everything. Of course, we talk about, we need to teach people how to do budgets, manage their money. But I still think our students, I don't know if they 100% understand when they decide a career path, what the ROI is. Go into it, I want to do this, and next thing you know, they got a debt and they're making $30,000 a year and they've got $100-something thousand in debt. They need to know that. And that's, to me, that's just something I wanted to add to not only the education part.
I'll add to that. You are totally right, but I think we've got to educate the people that are educating them of why this is important. Courtney talked about this. We've got to educate the educators, and we've also got to educate the parents, because it's going to take all of us to turn this around. It's not one course or one sitting before a computer doing this is not going to get us to where we need to go. But a lot of times we tell people to do this, we fail to tell them the why behind it. And we've got to demonstrate the why this is so important. We ask students to take biology. We ask them to take Algebra 1. We have them take literacy, and they ask us, when am I going to need this? Literacy is something they're going to need every day of their life, this literacy, financial literacy.
Yes, sir. How about the banker has some comments?
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a banker. I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm the rare bird that's been both in the credit union world and in the commercial banking world. So what y'all are talking about, my wife is tired of hearing me talk about it because talked about it during my 34 years of marriage. The banks and the credit unions do a good job of helping with financial literacy. But they look for volunteers that will come in and, accept the education. So love the fact that it's being done. We're looking at doing it in the college level. You're correct, they do in high school. My fellow rep here mentioned many things that I was wanting to speak to. One of it being budgeting. And I was fortunate that right out of college, one of my good friends made me sit down and do a budget. As a commercial lender, I work with, time, and you would be, you wouldn't believe how many of them they don't even know their numbers. A lot of times the CPA prepares it for them. But some of the things, to give you an example, I honestly have heard this during my banking career, and we're getting, kind of getting away from checks, but many times I've heard when I've had to call individuals and tell them that they are overdrawn. you would not believe how many times they say, well, that's impossible. I still have checks left. I've heard that many times. That's more of a thing of the past, but it's kind of the same thing. So, but you know, again, I've said many, many times that we may not use trigonometry. We may not use geography in our career. It's good to be well-rounded. Everybody uses finances, and I've said that all along. The two parts talking about budgets and stuff like that, debt to income. So unfortunately, many times I've had to turn people down that they were taught by their parents that, you know, you need to make payments on time, and they are good at that. What they don't know about is the credit cards you talked about, unsecured debt that goes into the debt to income. They could have perfect credit, but the credit scores are hurt very much by the availability of credit. So, you know, the financial institutions have to look at, well, what if this person uses every bit of that debt? So the debt to income is something that a lot of these young people and adults don't even realize. So again, this is near and dear to my heart. I've been preaching this for a long time. Everybody will use this, and everybody needs to know this. The credit's the other part of it. Some of the people were not taught, or maybe they didn't adhere to making payments on time. So unfortunately, they come in and I have to turn them down. I will try to help them as a banker. You should do this, to tell them what you need to do. And part of it's making payments on time. But again, if everybody can be exposed to this, it's good to get some in high school. I agree. As a 16, 18-year-old, there's no way I would have retained any of that. But, you know, we have a captive audience when they're in college. They're getting closer to being able to pay rent, all that I mentioned. So I applaud y'all for doing this. So thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, thank y'all very much.
I got it.
April Washington. Thank you, April. She's going to give us an update and some of what's happening in Washington and some trending information we need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, again, thank you for having me this morning, giving me the ability to discuss student loan debt and how it's impacting the state of Mississippi. I'm honored to be back with the state of Mississippi, working in the State Financial Aid Office. Previously spent 13 years with the office prior to going to the U.S. Department of Education, working with Federal Student Aid's Ombudsman Office. In that specific role with the Ombudsman Office, I work directly with student loan borrowers. I work with stakeholders and also members of Congress whenever they would contact our office with issues that their constituents were being faced with as it relates to their student loan debt. So I guess you can say I've had 20 years of experience at the institution level, the state level, and the federal level. So I've come full circle. And this has allowed me to see basically how student loan debt impacts our graduates, our higher education system, and also our workforce system. So therefore, you know, the committee, I appreciate your hard work and focus on these systems, and hopefully we can all work together to help tackle student loan debt in the state of Mississippi. So why does this matter for our state? Student loan debt in Mississippi is not just a higher education issue. It's a workforce and economic development issue. Right now, close to 453,000 Mississippians carry federal student loan debt. New data reveals 15.4% of all Mississippi residents have student loans. That's nearly 1 in every 6 people, which is amongst the highest in the nation. The typical Mississippi borrower carries an average student loan debt of a little over $37,000. What makes this challenging is our debt relative to income. Mississippi maintains the worst student debt burden in the country. The average student loan balance here equals roughly 56% of median annual income. In plain terms, Mississippians are trying to manage substantial debt on much lower wages, making every dollar owed far more painful than higher wage states. The strain shows up clearly in our repayment outcomes. Federal student loan payments resumed after the COVID-19 payment pause, and delinquency rates have surged across the nation. but Mississippi has been hit harder than almost any other state. Data released last month by the Urban Institute shows that 22.3% of Mississippi student loan borrowers were at least 60 days delinquent on their loans as of August of this year. This is the second highest delinquency rate in the nation, only behind Louisiana at 22.6%, and significantly higher than the national average of 16%. Nearly a quarter of our borrowers are seriously behind, facing damaged credit, mounting interest, and also the risk of default. Mississippi also continues to rank near the top in long-term default rates, reflecting that these problems are a persistent financial barrier, not just simply short-term hiccups. Beyond each statistic is a person who pursued education with the hopes of economic mobility, and instead they feel trapped. In my work at the Ombudsman Office, I spoke with borrowers whose wages were being garnished, tax returns were being seized, security clearances being denied, and in some cases, borrowers experiencing suicidal thoughts as student loans continue to weigh down on their livelihoods. These individual struggles add up to systemic drags on our workforce. There's often a common misconception that borrowers in distress simply don't want to repay their loans. Recent research from Federal Student Aid's former ombudsman and consumer protection organizations reveals a different story. Systemic failures in the loan servicing industry have played a role in borrowers' inability to. When federal student loan payments resumed in fall of 2023, the restart was chaotic. Borrowers reported never receiving bills, getting incorrect statements, having loans transferred without notice, and encountering non-functioning websites and long wait times whenever they reached out to their student loan servicer. Both FSA and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reported record numbers of complaints about servicer failures. Student loan borrowers who wanted to make payments simply could not. So let's look at alarming default rates. The consequences have been severe. Currently, approximately 10 million federal student loan borrowers are in default. That is roughly 1/4 of all borrowers in the nation. If current delinquency rate trends continue, research from Princeton University's Debt Collection Lab projects that as many as 13 million borrowers may be in default by the end of next year. For Mississippi, with the second highest delinquency rate in the nation, these systemic failures hit particularly hard. Our borrowers face not only lower wages and high debt burdens, but also a federal servicing system that fails to process payments correctly and provides inadequate customer service. Now let's turn to see how these individual challenges affect our colleges and universities. These borrower struggles don't just simply affect individuals, they also threaten our higher education institutions through what is called the cohort default rate. CDR measures the percentage of borrowers who default within 3 years of entering repayment. If an institution's rate exceeds 30% for 3 consecutive years or 40% in 1 year, they can lose eligibility for federal student aid, effectively cutting off access to federal Pell Grants and federal loans. This creates a vicious cycle. High numbers of delinquent borrowers lead to defaults. Defaults threaten institutional aid eligibility, and the loss of Title IV programs makes it harder for students to afford college without taking on mounting debt. Student debt affects whether Mississippians can buy homes, start families, and participate fully in our state's economy. National research shows that 51% of renters say student loans are a barrier to buying a home, and each $1,000 increase in student loan debt reduces home ownership rates by almost 2 percentage points. Borrowers with balances above $35,000 are significantly less likely to own a home than those with no student loan debt. Given Mississippi's high debt burden relative to our incomes, A large share of young adults here are potentially delaying or foregoing home ownership entirely. That means fewer first-time home buyers in our communities. The impact extends beyond housing. When households are sending hundreds of dollars a month to their student loan servicer, that is money that they are not spending in Mississippi businesses. Economists describe this as a debt overhang that suppresses consumer spending, potentially slowing job creation. The burden is especially visible in critical but modest paying careers such as teaching. And I think I've been going backwards instead of forwards. There we go. But yes, as I've just stated, the burden is especially visible in critical but modest paying careers such as teaching. A 2023 survey by Mississippi First found that 23.5% of Mississippi teachers owed more than $50,000 in student loans, exceeding the average the average teacher salary in our state. National research shows that teachers with student debt are 10 percentage points more likely to leave the profession within a year compared to debt-free peers. Mississippi struggles to recruit and retain educators, as you already know, in our critical shortage areas. And high debt burdens make it harder to attract qualified teachers who can earn more in other states and other professions. When student debt pushes educators and our healthcare workers out of the profession and out of the state and affects service quality, that is not just a personal hardship, it becomes a workforce capacity issue. But of course, all hope is not lost. The good news is that Mississippi does not have to start from scratch when we start thinking about solutions. Several states have created what's called state-level student loan ombudsmen or advocates, which are offices specifically charged with helping student loan borrowers navigate the system. Virginia, for example, established a student loan advocate in 2018. That office has helped hundreds of residents resolve issues such as incorrect balances or problems qualifying for loan forgiveness. Experts note that complaints handled through state levels often produce better results for borrowers than simply relying on federal channels alone. Other states have implemented various programs to support their student loan borrowers, such as loan repayment assistance programs. Mississippi, of course, our office is always appreciative of the funding for our loan repayment programs, as we already have the Winter Reed Teacher Loan Repayment Program for our educators. The state of Virginia and Maryland, they both offer free financial literacy and counseling services. But right now, Mississippi currently has no dedicated state-level advocate for its borrowers. Creating such a role would potentially give Mississippians somewhere to turn when they encounter problems and give policymakers like yourself a clearer window into issues that are being faced by our borrowers. So in closing, Mississippi has made substantial investments in higher education as a pathway to prosperity, but how that pathway is financed also matters. Right now, too many Mississippians who did what we asked of them, they enrolled, they studied, they graduated, they find that their student loan obligations limit the choices that education was supposed to open. Raising awareness is an essential first step. From there, the state can consider responses like strengthening need-based aid, increasing financial counseling, and giving borrowers a state-level resource to assist when they enter repayment. Every data point presented here represents a Mississippi borrower trying to build a better life. Addressing student loan debt is about aligning our higher education and workforce needs so that education is a springboard, not necessarily a lifelong burden, a lifelong financial burden for the people of the state. So again, I appreciate the committee's focus and attention to this matter, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? I think you've overwhelmed us.
I think it looks like it. By the look on your faces, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, you've got a question? All right, Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. One thing that jumped out, and I obviously didn't know, the cohort default rates being 30% over 3 years or 40% in any 1 year subjects you to losing your Title IV, I think was funding.
That is correct.
Is that publicly available data?
So it's kind of weird. Right now, the current cohort default rate is not a good indicator. The reason why is because during the COVID-19 pandemic, borrowers for about 3 years did not have to make any payments on their student loans. So that has impacted the cohort default rate. Right now, essentially every institution has a cohort default rate of 0%. Now, I can tell you that over the summer, the department did release what's called a non-payment list, which lists every institution in the nation and the percentage of their borrowers who are not making payments on their student loans. Every institution has access to that information, and they were all encouraged to review it and to start, taking active outreach to their student loan borrowers.
Because I would be very interested, even if it's historical, because if I go back to pre-COVID, I've got a pretty good idea of where our institutions were. I mean, is that publicly accessible, or is that something I need to ask you to follow up with me on?
Yes, we can get that data for you. Right now, the public information for our CDR rates, like I said, it's skewed because of that COVID-19 pause, but we definitely can get some historical data.
Because the other question I would have is, obviously, I'd want to know that number. You take COVID out of it, and let's just assume it's a clean number.
Sure.
We need to know that as legislators, because some of our institutions may be on the cusp of really having a problem. But a second thing would be, do they break those cohorts down? Because clearly, I would want to know what degree was sought, what percentage of people are in default. I mean, this may be part of the conversation we're having about what programs are we offering. And then certainly someone who did not complete is probably at a higher default rate because they're not appreciating the earning capacity that came with it. Now, as far as the servicing side of it, young people today, it's online. I don't know how many times my student loans have been sold and rebranded and, who's had it and not had it. But, it goes to the financial literacy piece because they have got to understand that. But I really do appreciate you bringing that forward because I had no idea that existed in the sense of losing funding in that capacity. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Madam
And we definitely can work on getting that data.
Senator McCon.
So, and I akin what you talked about here to some of the discussions that are going on a federal level with the reduction of the maximum amount of loans you can take out, student loans. But I also akin this back to very similar to the housing bust that occurred, where we've gotten to the point where we're now in a position of having to balance this stuff. To balance telling a kid that we want you to go to college and you did a great job getting to this point, but we also want to tell you when maybe you need to go to work. Or maybe you don't need to take out an additional $25,000 in debt, which is totally contrary to some of the models that we talked about yesterday. And I hate for us to have to be in a position of being a bad guy, but for the betterment of our kids out there and to keep them from going out there and facing $100,000 in debt, making $25,000 a year, at some point, we've got to step up and be the adults. And I don't think it's not fair to anybody, but it's dang sure not fair to the kids. And it comes back to the point is what is best for the kids. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the fact you're bringing this to light. I just think that our legislature, and I'll challenge both sides, that we've got to step up and figure out what we're going to do. Are we going to keep encouraging them to get more debt and degrees that maybe don't work for the benefit of them? Or are we going to finally just tell them, look, guys, you got where you need to be. You had your opportunity. Maybe it's time to go on and let's go to work for a few years and come back. That's not good for part of what we've talked about. Because one of the biggest things we talked about was getting these people that went and got 24 hours of college credit back in to finish their degree, whether it was a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. But the balance here is going to be difficult, and this is not going to be a fun task. But I appreciate everybody being in here for 2 days to discuss this and for us to finish up with this. Thank you for your work.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your, what you told us today. But one of the things I wondered, I mean, I don't think that this happens, but is there any way that when students are going in for a loan, are they ever talked to about what their salary might be in the future and how that would be affected by the loan?
Great question. So as it relates to anytime a student takes out a student loan, definitely they have to do what's called an entrance counseling. If you speak to most entering freshmen, 17, 18-year-olds, they're going to say, I have no idea what was in that entrance counseling. It's a lot of financial jargon. They are unfamiliar with it. And it's literally in one ear and out of the other. But you made a very good point as it relates to salaries. I think we can do a much better job educating our students because oftentimes they have unrealistic expectations of their starting salaries. I've spoken to some college students who they think they're going to graduate and automatically make six figures. I think that is wishful thinking for a lot of us. But that is definitely an area that I appreciate Jean and Courtney's presentation that encompasses the financial literacy part.
Another question, I know they paused the payments for the student debt.
So we're back in repayment.
I know, but they did during COVID.
Mhm,
They didn't pause the interest though, did they?
So actually they did.
Oh, did they?
For
Okay.
3 years, I tell people if you were smart, for 3 years, they paused the interest. You're at a 0% interest rate during the payment pause, where you can make payments and all of your payments went directly to the principal. So like I said, the payment pause ended in fall of 2023. After that, the federal government gave borrowers what's called an on-ramp period for an additional year. Basically, you went into repayment, but if you didn't pay on your loans, you were not negatively impacted. That's exactly, they said it's an on-ramp is to get you acclimated, get you back into, the process of paying on your student loans. But during the payment pause, interest was paused at 0%.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right.
I just want to thank you, Madam Chairman, and of course, Chairman of the House and all of the members and presenters for 2 days of valuable, practical information that we can use moving forward into the 2026 legislative session.
Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you so much for everybody who's maintained through this. So we really appreciate Chairman Scoggins and I really appreciate all of y'all hanging in. Y'all have given us a great deal to think about, and hopefully we'll have a busy and productive session come January. So thank y'all very much.